Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. Don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Story 1. I work an ice rink. I saw something that chilled me to the bone. I know I should be grateful for a chill job at an ice rink, especially as we gear up for a scorching summer. I'm thinking about quitting, though I'm too creeped out to go back there. I needed a summer job, and I was a little surprised by the lack of competition for a gig at the local rink. My first day was right after the interview. The pay wasn't great, but the expectations weren't bad either. Help customers, keep the place clean, restock the restrooms, that sort of work. The most important task was a team effort. Keep the rink temperature below freezing at all times. That made sense. It's an ice rink, not a swimming pool. At regular intervals, I checked the thermostat to make sure the rink remained between 19 and 29 degrees. Doing so ensured that the main room was always nice and chilly. My own frosty oasis in the middle of town. My boss was the face of the business, so he was usually up front serving guests or back in his office. Whenever he came out, he'd check the rink's temperature, even if I had just checked it myself. One day, I clocked in a few minutes late and found the boss hustling toward the thermostat. He seemed startled when he noticed me. "Seen anybody around here yet?" he asked. I checked the clock to see that we were still nearly an hour away from opening. "Not yet," I said. "Good." He smiled. Then he asked me to help set up a new game in the arcade. It was a massive cabinet, big screen, two-seater bench, huge speakers. The delivery men rolled it in and moved into place. So now it was time to plug in and see how it ran. I plugged in the power cord and fired up the cabinet. The screen flickered, the speakers roared to life, and then the whole place went dark. I looked out into the main room to see the boss sprinting for the breaker box. The girl at the concession counter dropped what she was doing and disappeared into the kitchen. I left the arcade to apologize for the mishap, and then I noticed a smell. It was like someone left meat out and went on vacation. The stench was heavy and sickening, so strong I could taste it. I figured it must have come from the kitchen. My boss was in the back, sweating bullets at the breaker box. "The wiring's screwy," he said when he saw me. "One thing goes wrong and the whole place loses power." He snapped a few switches back into place and closed the box. Behind us, machines hummed again. He sighed and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "It's just an old building, that's all," he said. He checked the thermostat and stayed by the rink until it was time to open. The smell had mostly dissipated by the time customers started filtering in, but it was hard to forget. It was still in my clothes when I went home. A few days later, the boss had to run errands, leaving me and the concession girl to hold the fort down. Everything seemed fine at first, but then a group of kids approached me from the arcade. They said the new cabinet wasn't working right. The screen kept freezing, and they couldn't get their quarters back. My boss had briefly showed me how to troubleshoot these machines, so I did what I could to diagnose the problem. It took longer than I'd like to admit. I was hesitant to unplug the game and restart it, but I tried everything I could to get the game working again. If I had to refund a few quarters, I imagined the boss wouldn't mind. At some point, I realized I was sweating. I dressed warm for work since the main room stays in the mid-50s, but I suddenly felt too hot. I told the kids I'd be right back and tried not to look conspicuous as I made my way to the rink thermostat. 30 degrees, still below freezing. I returned to the arcade to realize that it was the air conditioner that was struggling. It was blazing hot outside, and our AC was fighting hard to keep the room cool. I finally got the game up and running, then ran by the concession counter for lunch. The late afternoon rush kicked in, and I was on my feet for hours. Without the boss up front, I was renting out skates, checking the restrooms, and doing my best to keep the new arcade game running. I didn't get a moment to catch my breath until closing time. I shut off the lights and flipped the front door sign from open to closed. then realized it had been hours since I checked the rink thermostat. I knew I had to take a look before I left for the night. 35 degrees. Not great, not terrible. I adjusted the target temperature and waited until the system started pumping more coolant beneath the ice. I headed back to the door, but stopped at the hallway to the restrooms. There was someone standing at the end of the hall. I was startled, but more than anything, I just wanted to go home. "We're closed," I said. "I have to lock up now." He didn't move. "Do you need to use the restroom first?" I thought maybe he wasn't feeling well. Concession food can be rough on some people's stomachs. He turned to face me. The hall was dark except for the exit light over my head, which cast a dim red glow over his face. His head hung low and he wore a vacant expression, like he was asleep on his feet. Then he lifted his head to look at me. I didn't say a word. The more I stared, the more the features of his face seemed to be out of place, like it was just a mask. His eyes looked cloudy in the red light, but I could tell that he was looking at me. Then an intense shiver came over me. It was an ice-cold chill that pierced my core. It had to be fear, but I wrapped my arms close to warm up. Then he was gone. I looked behind me, then back down the hall. There was no one there. I didn't stick around to check the restrooms. I got out of there as soon as I could. The next day, I told my boss about the man in the hall. He listened quietly and took a while before speaking. "What did he look like?" he asked. I described a lifeless face and the dull eyes, feeling a hint of a chill just recalling it. "And he was dressed a little outdated?" I thought about it. The man wore a suit, but maybe the lapels were a little too big. The pants flared a bit wide. That wasn't what concerned me at the time, though maybe so. My boss nodded. "Did the ice rink go above freezing yesterday?" "It did," I said, "but I fixed it before leaving last night." "We got to keep an eye on it," he said. Then he left for his office. "You'll see people like that around here. It'll be okay. Just keep an eye on the rink." I looked over to the concession counter. My co-worker had been listening. She only met my eyes for a second, then she went about her work. We'd be opening soon, and the heat was sure to drive a crowd our way. It's a brutal summer, and when the temperatures rise so high, everybody blasts their AC. It puts a serious strain on the power grid. Yesterday, we tipped the meter too far. The power went out across downtown. My boss went out to fire up the generator, telling me to make sure nobody went near the ice. At first, customers sat in the dining area and waited to see if the power would return. I couldn't blame them. The air was still cool, and anything was better than going back out into the heat. As the day went on, though, the chill faded and there was no point in sticking around. Our customers left, and it was just me and my co-worker. Our boss clearly wasn't going to get generator up and running anytime soon, so I hoped that he would just let us go. My co-worker went outside to ask. The air was starting to turn muggy, so I went to check the thermostat. It had a backup battery, so I could at least see the rink's temperature. 40 degrees. It was only going to climb from there. With my back to the ice, I felt something move just behind me. The stench of spoiled meat returned, thick in the humid air. My legs quivered, but I ran for the door. I was in a hurry, so I decided to cut through the ice rink. That was a stupid idea. I started slipping immediately and fell hard on my back. I looked up into a crowd of dead faces. There were dozens of them, dead, bloody bodies, all standing on the ice. Their faces were frozen in horrified, silent howls, while some looked as if they had been beaten or crushed. They all watched me with pale, cloudy eyes. I heard myself scream, and I scrambled for footing. I fell again and again, trying to crawl across the ice. Finally, I reached the other side and bolted to the exit. As I pushed through the doors, I could see that my co-worker's car was gone. She had the right idea. I didn't stop to lock up. I took the day off and called my boss to tell him what happened. He didn't question any of it. He seemed to know what was going on, so I asked for an explanation. "You know the gravel lot down the street?" he asked. "There used to be an office building there. It collapsed years ago when I was just a kid. A lot of people died." I had never heard the whole story before. Apparently, there were so many casualties, the local morgue was overwhelmed. They had to store bodies at the ice rink to keep them cool. They were there on the ice for days until they could be moved or identified. Now I understand what I saw, but that doesn't make it any better. I don't want to go to work tomorrow. Story 2. My grandparents tried to warn me about that lake, but I didn't listen. My boyfriend paid the price. When I was little, my grandparents used to always warn me about going near the water at our summer house, and I should have believed them. Me and my boyfriend were visiting my grandparents' summer house. We were so excited to get there as both of us were working hard before. That vacation was exactly what I needed. We drove there and everything was as usual. Nothing weird or unusual happened on the first day. We were cooking food on a campfire and telling stories to each other. When I mentioned about my grandparents always warning me about going too close to the water, I told them how they were so overprotective about that and never allowed me to go alone to the lake. They probably saw something weird there. My boyfriend told me while smirking. No way. They were just scared that I was going to drown. Old people don't think kids can swim, I argued. We talked about different subjects after that, and then went to bed. The next day I woke up feeling good. I wanted to feel even better, and decided that I would go for a swim. Walking to that lake, I had a horrible flashback of my grandparents secretly whispering to each other about Nixie in that lake. I remembered overhearing a conversation about when my grandfather was young. They said that this creature called Nixie took his brother, and that they shouldn't tell me about it. My grandpa and his brother were just swimming in the lake, when all of a sudden his brother got taken underwater. That was the last time he saw his brother. Remembering that made me a little bit scared of the water, but I thought they just made it up to make water seem like a threat. When we arrived at that lake, there were birds singing and crickets chirping. You want to go in first? I asked my boyfriend. No way, it's too cold. I think I don't even want to swim, he replied. Come on, you are a man, and that cold water ain't a threat to you, I told him and teased him. Alrighty then, he replied and started to take off his clothes. We both got undressed and went to stand on that dock. The water was pretty clear for a lake. You almost saw the bottom. I saw a dark fish-like figure swim under the dock. It was bigger than the average fish was at that lake. It was really massive. It swam under the dock and stayed there when my boyfriend was just about to jump in. Don't go in. I don't trust this lake. I yelled. My boyfriend stopped, turned and looked straight at me. What? He asked. Then everything went quiet. All the birds stopped singing at the same time, and so did the crickets. It was really weird. Don't go in the water, I continued to ask him. He talked me back into swimming and just jumped in. Just before he went in, I saw movement in the water. I saw something moving between the reeds. It was dark green, a little bit mossy. It resembled a human very much, but it looked wrong in some way. It was just a quick glance, and then it vanished. My boyfriend hit the water and swam for a bit. Coming with me, he yelled. Then he dived. He was underwater longer than I expected, and I hesitated to go in. I thought he was rushing me to get in with this type of stunt. Then I had to jump. I went in and tried to swim frantically. I scanned the water for my boyfriend, but couldn't spot him. He was just gone. I tried to look for him for a couple more minutes, but didn't see anything, and then climbed back to the dock. As I got up, I tried to yell his name. That was the last time I swam at that lake. It was also the last time I saw my boyfriend. After looking around and trying to scream his name, I called the emergency hotline and got help to find him, but nothing was found. Saying this makes me angry and sad, but I think my grandparents were right all along. That lake is dangerous, probably even cursed, and nobody should ever go there. Story 3. My best friend isn't my best friend anymore. My best friend Charlie has ceased to be my best friend. We're both 15. And no, we didn't fall out like teenagers do. There was no big argument over a girl. But Charlie is no longer my best friend. Let me give you a bit of background. I have known Charlie since we were both 5. Charlie came from what can be stereotypically described as the wrong side of the tracks. His mother drank. His father was a ghost, and his uncle raised him, but he was a very decent lad, and he didn't let the tragedy affect his life. When Charlie turned 11, his uncle got a job in Germany and left Charlie alone, and I guess what you could call orphaned. Charlie was my best friend, and we spent every second together in and out of school. We played football, we chased girls, even though we were arguably too young to know about girls. And we played knock-down ginger on the neighboring houses. Ding-dong ditch to you Americans. With the prospect of Charlie being moved away to an orphanage in London and miles away from me, I begged my parents to foster Charlie. I am an only child, and having Charlie in the house would be my dream. My parents did the right thing, and we took Charlie in. I guess at that point, Charlie stopped being my best friend and started being my brother. This summer, Charlie went to Germany for the whole summer holiday. I was so happy for him. He was trying to learn the language and experience his first trip out of England. He got to spend time with an uncle whom I know cared for and missed him, and he got to experience a bit of adventure. But when Charlie returned, he had changed a lot. And I don't think my best friend Charlie is my best friend anymore. I decided to write a journal observing Charlie's behavior, because writing this down is the only way for me to understand who or what Charlie is. The following has taken place over the last 6 days. So, let's start from the beginning. Day 1, when Charlie returned, there was a big smile on his face as he walked down the aisles of Gatwick Airport. Everybody got a hug. It was a warm hug, the type of hug that only Charlie can give. "How have you been?" he asked us. That was when I noticed the slightest ever deviation of his accent. The old Charlie would go, "How are ya?" But this, "How have you been?" It was formal, and if I were to overanalyze it, I would say that he hit the consonants harder than a Southeast Englander would. I asked him if he picked up any German out there. He laughed and said no, then threw his bag at me to carry it. This was out of character for Charlie. 2, it was subtle, but the Charlie I knew was meek and mild. He wouldn't even make a cup of tea for himself, in the house he had lived in for many years, without asking my parents for permission first. To throw his hand luggage at me was a cockiness and arrogance that Charlie did not have. I just put it down to European rudeness. I could list an accumulation of all the poor manners that Charlie had in the airport, but you see where I am going. Something was off. We caught up in the living room. My parents were there too, and Charlie told us all about Hamburg, Berlin, Dusseldorf, Frankfurt. He got around Germany. "And how was your uncle?" I asked. "Fine, just fine," he said, then proceeded to explain the River Rhine in the smallest detail. "Did your uncle take you to all these places in Germany?" I asked. "No, he worked." My parents looked at me dubiously. They wouldn't have authorized a trip to Germany where Charlie would be wandering the cities alone, had they known. "Your uncle worked a lot." I said. "Too much and no money to show for it." Every time Charlie spoke, I just noticed that a little of his accent was off-key. "Why do you now sound German?" I asked. "I don't. Your accent is weird." He looked at me, raised an eyebrow, and said, "That's not a German accent." Day 2, 3 a.m. that night. Pitch black. I hear ruffling in Charlie's bedroom. I got up to see if he was okay and opened his door. He's got one leg in and one leg out of the window. "What are you doing?" I yell. "S-H-H-H." He screeches back. "Are you fleeing?" I asked. "No. Look, I'll level with you. I am seeing Tony." He said. "Tony Maynard?" I asked. Tony was the angel of the town. Everybody fancied her, especially Charlie. No way would she have been interested back at him back then. I could not believe it, and I felt a strong emotional reaction. Severe jealousy. "No way," I said. "I swear. No. I promise you. But cover for me. I am going to see her now. She just WhatsApped me. Charlie. Please, Raymond." This was my best friend and brother sneaking off to score with the hottest chick in town. How could I say no? "Just go," I said. I went to bed raging. Tony? Charlie? Life isn't fair. Credit where credit was due. When I walked to school that morning, Charlie was a few feet ahead of me, holding hand with Tony. It was that afternoon in school that I caught up again with Charlie. I looked closely at his skin. It was peeling off, like severe acne that wasn't there before. His skin was pale, and his cheekbones were sticking out prominently. He looked like the malnourished little boy that my parents took in all those years ago. "You look tired, Charlie. You don't look well," I said. "I'm all good. Just jet lag." "Jet lag?" "Yeah. It is a 1-hour flight. 2, I think." "So jet lag then?" Walking home, we got the usual hazing from Rory Keene. Rory was throwing trash that he was picking out of the dustbin and aiming at both of us as we crossed his path. I felt an apple core, a tin can, and a banana peel bounce off my shoulders. The key to dealing with Rory is head down and don't acknowledge. He was as hard as nails, an amateur boxer, and the terror of Ridgeway Comprehensive School. "I wish someone would do something about him," I said. I was red with anger. Rory had been the bane of our lives since year 7. "Well, I'll go and speak to him." Charlie turned to walk towards Rory, and I grabbed his arm. "Are you mad?" Charlie could be many things, but a fighter was not one of them. Day 3. That morning, my parents were both at work. I got up at about 5 and needing a piss. When I got down to the toilet downstairs by the kitchen, I saw Charlie's head in the fridge. He was stuffing raw chicken fillets into his throat. Now, this would have been the perfect time to call him out. Scream at him, "What the hell are you doing?" But I didn't. Do you want to know why? Charlie was an orphan from a family of poverty, and I didn't want to embarrass him. God knows how he survived his awful childhood before my parents fostered him. I turned away and pretended that I didn't see it. When I went down to have my breakfast and coffee, I saw that he had poured milk all over the floor and gnawed on a wedge of butter. I was livid, but again I kind of decided not to embarrass him, and I cleaned it up myself. Another thing was, and I first noticed it when he was seated next to me in science, he had these weird hairs. They were like hard, bristly hairs growing out of his neck and back. We're both adolescents, and you can chalk it up to that. But these were disgusting little pockets of hair. He needed to have a go with the tweezers. Tony approached us at our desks and spoke to Charlie. They both had this weird robotic tone when they spoke to one another, like they were being watched and had to play it being normal. It's hard to explain, but it was a forced formality. "Hello, Charlie," Tony said. "Hello, Tony," Charlie said. "Are we still meeting for lunch at 1:15? "Yes." "Okay, thank you and goodbye," Tony said. "Jesus Christ, a lot of passion between you two, I see," I said. Charlie shot me a look of rage. One thing about boys, showing you're made up in front of girls was tantamount to teenage treason. "Sorry," I said. Tony awkwardly shuffled away. We walked down the hall to our next lesson, and was suddenly stopped by Rory. "Shit, excuse me," Charlie said amiably. "There's a 10-pound tax to walk through this hallway," Rory said. "Can we owe you, Rory? We don't have any money." I said, "Afraid not," Rory said. "I need to get to my next lesson. If you wouldn't mind," Charlie said dryly. "Nope," Rory said. He put his hand on Charlie's chest to halt Charlie. I closed my eyes. Poor Charlie was going to get a right hook. We've all eaten one from Rory over the years. I heard a crunch 4 times. Broken jaw. Poor Charlie. I looked up. Rory's arm had been yanked from its socket and was flopping about the hallway. Charlie nearly tore it off. Rory screamed from the bottom of his stomach. Mr. McCarthy, the head, came straight out of his office and ran down the corridor with a face of sheer rage. He grabbed me and Charlie by the collar and threw us down the hall and into his office while the school nurse sprinted towards Rory. Karma, if you ask me. I was sitting in the lobby of the head's office. I could see through the glass a silhouette of Charlie and Mr. McCarthy talking. It wasn't anywhere nearly as volatile as I thought that it would be. 20 minutes later, Mr. McCarthy opened his door and ushered Charlie through it. "You and Charlie can go," Mr. McCarthy said, closing his door on us. "What the hell did you say to him?" I asked. "I appealed to his sense of justice," Charlie said. Rory was rushed to A and E straight after, and the consensus amongst the playground was that he would never be able to throw a proper punch ever again. Charlie had never stood up to a bully before, but now this new Charlie was breaking arms with one little pull. And who even was Charlie? Mr. McCarthy never called my parents. They never found out about the incident. That was it. It was officially written off. Mr. McCarthy. The hard R's of school had seemingly forgotten when one student broke another student's arm. That evening, gathered around the television, we watched The Simpsons. Now, this may seem like a weird and pathetic observation to you readers, but Charlie always laughed at The Simpsons. And I mean laughed. From the living room to the bedroom, his laugh would echo out. But as he sat in front of the TV, in between my parents, he was stoic and still, just watching and observing the television. His eyes were wide and bright, and he didn't move a single facial muscle. Then he turned to me and said, "Raymond, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak with your parents alone." I nodded and walked upstairs and into my room. I tried to eavesdrop with the door open, but all I could hear was a muffled utterance between adult voices and child voices. I went to bed, and my final thoughts of that day were pretty concrete. My best friend isn't my best friend, not anymore. Story 4. I met a drifter who walked out of the Darien Gap. Part 1. The End of Safety. Folks don't often hear these words. We are so very used to the world being nice and connected. You have your cell phone signal. You have your roads, water, and your electricity. The end of safety is the last true wilderness on this planet, also known as the Darien Gap. There are no roads, power lines, charted rivers, or rescue routes. It is a section of untamed and protected land between Central and South America. You can visit, if you so chose to, but doing so means you're on your own, truly on your own. Guides you hire will carefully lead you through pre-planned routes they have established, but to do so without a guide is often a fool's errand. My name is David. I'm a traveling medic and missionary. I'm basically a pastor with first aid knowledge. When this all happened, I was working in Yavisa, Panama. This is the last city between here and Colombia, the last place north of nothingness. So, it really was a shock when someone came stumbling out of the underbrush. At first, the rest of the staff, and I was certain it was some staff member who had wandered off from the hospital compound. But she wasn't employed by the hospital, nor a volunteer. A quick call to the Parque Nacional Darien confirmed that there were no tours at the time. It was the wet season. After all, the wet season is especially inhospitable in the untamed rainforest. It's treacherous even for the most skilled guides. So, here we had a mystery woman sitting in the hospital, covered in days' worth of sweat, mud, scratches, sap stains, and stink from her travels. I questioned if she was indigenous at first, but that wasn't likely. She had Asian traits, her skin darker than most. She was far taller than any Asian woman I had ever seen before, standing about 188 centimeters tall. She was clearly built to take care of herself. Her body was well toned. She had some possessions which she wouldn't let us touch bundled up into a trench coat, as well as a pair of red-tinted glasses she refused to let us near. Her pants might have been white at some point, but now were browned and dirted by the jungle underbrush. She wore a sleeveless turtleneck and fingerless leather gloves. Her hair was brown, and she had a scar on her left cheek that looked older than the other scratches on her body. I was in charge of the initial intake for the mystery woman. Colombiana? I asked her as I did my best to clean and dry her wounds. She turned from me when I attempted to dress the small scratches. I rolled my eyes. "My name is David. I'm a missionary here at the hospital. I'm trying to help." When she didn't respond, I tried again in Spanish. In Spanish, she admitted, "I don't have a problem understanding you. I just don't want to be waiting around here." What struck me as odd was her accent. Not Asian or Latino in the least. She sounded almost Mediterranean. Having traveled all over as a missionary, I was pretty well versed in accents. "You don't have to stay long. We just want to help you." I explained. "And they want to help too?" She asked, motioning to police who stood near the doorway. I heaved a sigh. Police never make any medical situation better. The police were here because, as far as they knew, she was on the run. Panama police were not keen on letting anyone come out of the Gap who didn't have papers. And she did not have papers. "Could I at least get your name?" I asked. "I gave you mine." "You're not my type," she hissed. "I'm not trying to hit on you," I grumbled in frustration. I genuinely want to help. Bullshit, she growled, her light brown eyes appearing to flash red as she did so. No one genuinely wants to help. Everyone's after something. Sooner or later, they let you know what that is. I like to skip all the betrayal bullshit and just avoid getting mixed up in everyone else's problems. Most folks are out for their own goals, sure. I can tell you I'm not. I glanced at the police near the door. But I'll be honest, I can't speak for the local authorities. She gave the police a side eye and then glanced over to me, her eyes scanning over the scrubs, which were sealed in plastic, and waiting for her on a nearby table. Why don't you wash up? It seems like you've been through hell. I pointed to the shower stall in the far corner. We'll have your clothes cleaned. Then you can be on your way. Those fuckers come near me, I'm going to break their hands. She threatened as she grabbed the scrubs I had offered. She tossed her long hair to the side, and as she did, I spotted a few small twigs which had gotten stuck in her mane of hair. My name is Kasara, by the way. Nice to meet you, I said with a weak smile as she walked off to the shower. The local police turned to me, one officer approaching. She's cooperating? Minimally. I informed, you get her to confess anything? One officer asked, drugs? Is she an escaped sex slave? I chuckled, yes. She came right out and told me her whole life story the moment I asked. I rolled my eyes. Does she look like a sex slave? The second officer shook his head. She's bad news. I can see it in her eyes. She's part of the cartel, or some kind of fugitive from the law. No one runs through the gap unless they have nothing else to lose. After some time, Kasara walked out of the shower. Her hair mostly dried. Her long mane of hair made a noticeable wet spot on the paper and plastic scrub she wore. Kasara plopped her clothing, which reeked in front of me. It's your ass if I don't get this back like new, she warned me. After we search it, the first officer said, approaching Kasara, and you, for contraband. Kasara narrowed her eyes as the two officers surrounded her. Do not touch me, she threatened. The first officer shook his head. We can do this easy or hard. What is it going to be, Chica? Kasara's eyes narrowed as I watched her fist clench. So tight her knuckles went white. The officer moved forward, reaching for Kasara's arm. Kasara's eyes tracked the officer as he approached her. Once he was within range, her arm moved in a blur, wrapping around his bicep, the other on his wrist. With a sickening snap, Kasara hyperextended his elbow. I watched in shock as the bone popped up under his skin as his arm bent backwards. The officer dropped to the floor in pain. In a panic, the second officer whipped out his pistol. Stop right there, he shouted, both shaking hands trying to steady his pistol as he took aim at Kasara. Kasara spun on her heel, grabbing his wrist with an outstretched hand and forcing his hands up as she rushed towards him. She proceeded to deliver a firm hit to his liver, sending him tumbling backwards, his gun still in her hand. I froze in place, eyes wide as I had watched Kasara shut down both officers in a few blinks of an eye. The second officer was laid out on the floor, either unconscious or pretending to be. Either way, I didn't envy him. The first officer was babbling in pain as I rushed over to him. Shit. I looked over his mangled arm and called out for a doctor as nurses and doctors rushed in. The sound of a pistol hitting the floor drew my attention. I turned and saw that Kasara had dropped the gun, grabbed her clothes, and was making her way toward the window. Wait! I called out. I said you could use the laundry, didn't I? Kasara stopped by the window, lifting her eyebrow up at me. Aren't you going to freak out and arrest me? No, thanks. You acted in self-defense and warned them. I shrugged. And they're still alive? I cleared my throat. Please, just... I still have to address some of those injuries. They're flesh wounds. I'll be fine, Kasara growled. Flesh wounds can become infected. I reminded. Fine. Kasara took a deep inhale through her nose and turned back to me. But the second this laundry is done, I'm out of here. With that, I managed to collect her clothing, as well as pick up the second officer who had woken from his stupor. I escorted him out of the room. I locked the door behind me, my heart pounding in my chest. The second officer glared at me. Being chummy, eh? Why didn't you help? I'm a missionary. I hissed under my breath. Turn the other cheek and help people. That's all I do. What about you two? She said not to touch her. She could be a drug mule or cartel. You saw how she fought us off. I am calling for backup, the second officer whined. Listen, I shook my head. She just wants to go. Why is that so difficult? Leave the law enforcement to us, okay? The officer grabbed at her clothing, rifling through it. After a moment or two, he found a small wallet and keychain. I groaned. Certain Kasara wouldn't be too pleased to find out I let the officer do this. Not that I could have stopped him. The officer grinned as he pulled out a pair of $10 bills, which I thought was odd. Sure, some folks at shops wouldn't mind taking U.S. currency, but it sure as hell wasn't something I'd expect a traveler from the South to have. The officer pulled out an ID card next. He examined it carefully. He gave a confused look after a few moments. What the hell is this? He inspected the ID and showed it to me. I could understand his confusion as I tried to make sense of what I was looking at. Can you read this? The officer asked me. The ID was hers. It had a photo of Kasara, some numbers written here and there. I think one had to be height, as I saw 188 centimeters, and something else which said 27. I assumed her age. The rest was all strange words and letters. The only word at the top that I could remember was Pi Epsilon Nu Theta Epsilon Sigma Lambda. I'm not even sure what language that is, let alone what alphabet. There was one last symbol in the corner as well. It was this. All in all, the ID was beyond strange. It didn't look like any passport or ID I had ever seen, yet it appeared official. It had some numbers across the top. A holographic image of some marble bust of a regal woman's face was printed on what felt like metal. I've never seen anything like that. I remarked. The officer just took the ID, pocketed the money, and then placed everything back in the wallet. He grinned at me. Keep her in there. I'm going to run this. As he walked off, I just let an exasperated sigh out, and I headed toward the hospital laundry room. I tossed Kasara's clothing into the wash, keeping her wallet in my pocket as I walked away. The fluorescent lights flicked for a moment before they went out, which happens a lot, mainly when the dryers go off. However, not so much the washing machines. I pulled out my phone to use as a flashlight, looking around for the hallway leading to the fuse box. That's when I heard the footstep behind me. I turned around and found nothing. I squinted into the darkness, holding my phone up. Hello? I called out. Who is there? No answer. Officer. I called out again, concerned about who or what could be wandering around in the dark. Kasara? Just at the edge of the light, I could see a pair of feet, with black boots like the first officer's. Officer? Is that you? I called out. They didn't move. I took a step forward, hoping the light would illuminate further. The light moved, and within the shadow, so did the feet. I swallowed hard. See, this isn't funny. I have to flip the breaker. I said softly. I turned and started walking down the hallway again. The footsteps started to follow me again. I whipped around in there, again, right at the absolute edge of my phone's light, with the same boots. I took a few steps backwards. The boots followed, one step, two step, always right at the edge of my light. Oh, officer. I called out. This isn't funny. Stop this. I tried taking a few steps forward, but now it appeared as if the hallway itself was stretching away from me, taking the light with it. I stopped. The boots remained. This time I turned down the hallway and ran. I could hear the footsteps keeping pace with me. I kept running as fast as I could down the hallway. As I did, I saw the hallway turn to the right. Even though it was dark and I was panicked, I knew that was where the breaker box was. As I turned and rushed down the hallway, those ominous footsteps continued right behind me. Finally, I reached the machine room. I pushed past a heavy door, opened up the breaker, and spotted the levers that were tripped. I flipped the breakers just as I heard footsteps near the door. With my finger still on the last breaker, I heard the door creak open. The lights came back on as I turned to the doorway. Nothing, just the door. My heart hammered in my chest as I made my way to the door, peeking outside. Hello, David. The voice of the first officer caught me off guard. I jumped a bit, turning to him. Was that you? The officer narrowed his eyes on me, his arm in a sling. I saw the lights off, so I came here. What were you doing? Fixing the lights, I said, looking at his feet. They appeared to be the same boots that were following me. The officer's left hand fell heavily on my shoulder. Listen, David, he began, his breath hot and musky. Get the girl's trust and we'll treat this little aiding and abetting thing without a thought. Okay? Just keep her here. You attacked her, Officer Dash. I was cut off. Aditya, the officer said softly. Sorry, I said as I gave him a curious look. Maybe the drugs the doctors gave him for his arm were affecting him. The officer looked confused for a moment before he shook his head. I said, I'm Officer Aguilar, understand? Sure, I said, clearing my throat. But as I was saying, you attacked her. Attacked? We did no such thing. We merely attempted a standard cavity search. Officer Aguilar grinned. She'd likely have even enjoyed it, if she let me. I'm good with my hands. I was growing increasingly uncomfortable. Listen, I'm going to head back to do my rounds. Before you go, Officer Aguilar showed me the strange ID removed from Kasara's wallet. We've made copies, but here's the girl's ID. Put it back where you found it. Officer Aguilar instructed. I sighed, taking the ID. Fine. I announced as I started to walk away. Don't forget, Officer Aguilar said as I made my way down the hallway. Keep the girl here. I furrowed my brow, but all I could do was continue my rounds. As I did my routine, I would occasionally check in on Kasara. The first time I noticed that Kasara was sitting on her cot, her legs crossed, doing some kind of breathing exercise. Hey, I called out to her. Kasara opened one amber-colored eye. The light playing tricks on me, it seemed. What? Clothing is in the wash. Should take a good couple of hours, okay? I informed her. Fine, Kasara said as she closed her eyes. Let me know when it's done. Well, okay then. I chuckled. I turned and headed out of the room, stopping in the doorway just in time to hear Kasara say something. Thanks, Kasara said under her breath. I smiled. You're welcome. Kasara didn't say another word as I left. My next check-in as my rounds continued was after dark. I wasn't too concerned to find Kasara sleeping, with nothing odd to consider, and with her not trying to leap out the window again, I went back to move her clothing over to the dryer. I considered the sort of person Kasara was as I moved her clothing over. It was pretty sparse clothing, and she didn't even have a packed backpack or anything with her. I wondered if that was intentional, or she lost it in the gap. I also considered whether or not Kasara would even tell me if it was. Kasara didn't seem the sort to open up or trust anyone. She was certainly a loner. While I was mildly paranoid about her running off in the middle of the night, I hoped that her clothing was enough to keep her in her room for the short term. Whether or not I would have any of my questions answered at the time remained a mystery. Man, do I wish that mystery remained. It was hours later as my rounds continued when things took an even more chaotic turn. It was toward the end of my shift when I heard the smoke alarms go off. My first instinct was to check the laundry room, as I thought I had set the dryer on for too long. Kasara's clothing would have been dry some time ago. My thought was that perhaps the old dryers failed to click off and it started to burn clothing or start a fire. I discovered that wasn't the case in the least. As I rushed down the hallway toward the laundry room, I passed by Kasara's room. There, coming from her doorway, I saw smoke. I rushed inside and my eyes went wide at what I saw. Kasara was laying on the bed, her eyes closed tightly. She was struggling, somehow, as if having a terrible dream. But that wasn't my biggest concern. Her sheets were one fire. Kasara's hands raised up, and I could see fire wrapped around her arms up to her shoulders. I rushed to the hallway and grabbed the fire extinguisher, dashing in and spraying the sheets down. Kasara sat up as the foam covered her, and I staggered back as she let out a cry of pain. In a final burst of some sort, a ball of flame flew out of her sheets, knocking the foamed and burned fabric to the floor. Kasara's eyes were wide open and appeared red in the dark light. I quickly flicked on the light and grabbed the burn kit from a nearby first aid station. I rushed to her side, pulling out everything I'd need to dress a burn wound, snapping on a pair of clean latex gloves. "It's okay," I shouted as I noted that her scrubs were burned on either hip. Steam rose off of Kasara's hands, and I quickly reached for them to examine the extent of the damage. Let go. Kasara snapped. I know it hurts. I called out. Calm down. I need to treat your burn wounds. We'll get you something for the pain. Kasara's eyes darted back and forth as she looked at the burned sheets and her burned clothing. Shit. No. It's gonna be fine. I took her hand gingerly, looking it over. To my shock, there weren't any burn marks. Even as I looked over her trimmed nails, which had a rough coat of black nail polish, her skin looked unharmed. All the way up to her shoulders, though the scrubs she was wearing were singed, her skin unmarred. My eyes traveled up to Kasara's, and her reddish eyes locked on mine, a sincerity in her voice as she spoke. I'm sorry. I was beyond bewildered as she asked her next question. Are my clothes dry yet? I met a drifter who walked out of the Darien Gap. Part 2. Are my clothes dry yet? I had just watched the flames consume Kasara's body, and she wasn't even slightly burned, not even singed. In confusion, as if my own sanity were in question, I checked her arms for any form of burns. Still, nothing. Hey, David, I'm fine. Kasara snapped as she ripped her hands away from me. Don't worry about it. What was that alarm? Officer Aguilar shouted as he burst into the room. I assumed he saw the smoke. I looked over Kasara as I got to my feet, wondering how best to explain the situation without sounding insane. I don't know, Lou Cigarette, I suggested, out of any real explanation for the fire. Officer Aguilar looked at Kasara, approaching her and looking down his nose at her. Were you smoking, Chica? Kasara's lip rose in a sneer at the term. I cleared my throat, hoping to calm her slightly. The only thing I'd smoke around here is you, Puto, Kasara snapped. I heaved a sigh. At least it wasn't physical violence. I'd take what I could get. Officer Aguilar scoffed at her, turning from us. Report any more funny business to me. Yes, fine. I placated the officer just so he would leave. Officer Aguilar walked out of the room. Hey, Puto, Kasara whispered to me. I sighed. I know what that means, so please stop. Apparently ignoring the rest of what I said, Kasara continued. My clothes, are they ready yet? Yes, they're likely dry. I answered, growing increasingly agitated. Mind if I have them back? Kasara asked. I shrugged and headed out to retrieve her clothing, hoping I didn't get any odd lightning behavior or footwear sneaking up behind me in the hallways. Luckily, retrieving Kasara's clothing went without incident, as I returned to see Kasara looking over her hand curiously. It was at this point I really noticed the amount of scars along her fists and forearms. They stretched all the way up her biceps, appearing to be deep cuts moving from her fists down to her elbows. I placed her clothing on her bed, fresh and clean. I glanced at the scars. Are those work-related? Kasara clenched her fists and opened a few times. I suppose you could say that, she said as she looked at her clothes. You didn't wash my wallet, did you? I shook my head, reaching into my pocket and handing her wallet back to her. Nope, it's nice and dry. Kasara took the wallet and narrowed her eyes on me. Feels lighter. Shit, I thought to myself as she bounced the wallet in her hand. That cop took her cash. Kasara opened it up and looked up at me with a rather bemused expression. Really? It was $20, dude. How hard up are you? I flinched. It wasn't me. Well then, who the fuck was it? Kasara asked. The cops. One of them sifted through your wallet. I sighed, reaching into my pocket. They didn't take anything else, did they? Kasara snapped, panic in her voice as she checked her wallet. I had returned her ID, but she seemed unconcerned with it. Kasara sighed in relief as she pulled an old photograph out of her wallet. The photo was of a woman with dark hair and glasses. She wore a tank top and shoulder-mounted pistol harness with an old pistol stowed in the holster. Almost honey-colored eyes were brightly smiling at whoever was taking the picture. Amusingly, the long black-haired man, who was clearly taking the photo, could be seen in the woman's glasses, reflected back at the camera. Both individuals were apparently happy, and I couldn't help but ask, "Family?" Kasara was silent as she sighed, slipping the photo back into her wallet. Which one? Which one? I repeated, unsure what she was asking, which cop rifled through my shit. Was it that dude whose arm I broke, or the one I knocked on his ass? Kasara asked. I recalled the brawl between Kasara and the officers. The second cop you knocked on his ass took it. He gave it to Officer Adelar, the one whose elbow you dislocated, who gave it back to me. I only dislocated his elbow. Kasara sighed. I'm getting sloppy. You did a number on the guy. I commented. Flattery will get you nowhere. Now scram. I gotta get dressed if I'm gonna get my money back, Kasara warned as she pulled her clothing out of the small laundry bag I provided. I shrugged and headed out of the room, giving her time to change. As I waited, I couldn't help but ask myself, who uses the word scram these days? After a few minutes, Kasara walked out of the room, now dressed in her red shirt, cream-colored jeans, and trench coat. Her heavy boots announced her presence pretty well as she rubbed her glasses against her shirt and slipped them on. Where are the cops? I shrugged. I'd assumed by the security desk. I think they've been working in shifts. With that, Kasara was marching down the hallway. I grimaced as I ran after her. So, they are police. I'm hoping we can call your last outburst self-defense. But if you're going to get into an altercation over $20, I mean I could dash. Did you take my money? Kasara asked. Well, no I dashed. I was cut off. Again. Then I don't want your money, Kasara snapped. I want my money. I groaned as we finally reached the security office, where the second officer from earlier was. Well, isn't that perfect? Kasara said with a smile, a madness coming over her eyes. I didn't like that look, not one bit. I was not ready to try and get involved in a patient whose mental state wasn't all there, let alone someone as physically capable as Kasara. I wondered if now would be a good time to ask the nursing staff if they had tranquilizers on hand. The officer sat there with his feet up on the desk behind a glass partition. Upon seeing Kasara storming up to him, he got to his feet. Hey, we've still got questions for you. Kasara moved as close to glass as she could, glaring daggers at the officer. I've got one for you. Where's my money pendejo? The officer was caught off guard and glanced at me for some kind of help. I just shrugged. I don't know what you're talking about, the officer defended. Kasara nodded and leaned down to the little speaker hole in the glass partition, under which was a small slot for passing documents. You don't, huh? The officer shook his head. With a quick motion, Kasara's fist smashed against the thick glass partition. Despite the fact it was bulletproof, a few layers cracked. Now a web of spider glass separated the second officer and Kasara. How about now? Kasara hissed. The officer jumped at Kasara's impressive display of strength before he reached into his pocket and tossed two $10 bills down near the slot. Smart man, Kasara said as she grabbed the money and headed towards the exit. It's been real David, but I have shit to do. I growled to myself, remembering Officer Aguilar's request. Wait! The authorities aren't just going to let you cross into Panama. They're likely going to arrest you if you don't have the proper papers. Let them try, Kasara challenged, shaking her head as we exited the building. I've got a place to go, okay? She turned to me, her face stern once more. But thanks for the help. Clean clothes are a good start to the rest of my travels. So, thanks again. I gave in at this point, shaking my head. Well, if I can't stop you, I guess I'll wish you luck. I'm not sticking around here much longer anyway. Where are you heading off to? Kasara asked. Haiti, I admitted. Heading out from the Port of Balboa to Port-au-Prince in the morning. That's northward, right? Kasara thought for a moment. Technically. I laughed, but I'm not looking for company. Just trying to plan out the next leg of my journey, Kasara mused. Trying to get to Canada, as far away from here as possible. Mind if I ask why? I'm doing missionary work. But why do you need to get that far up north? Family. I asked. Casera reached a magnetically locked door. I was certain this would stop her, but she just grabbed the handle and gave a hard pull. The magnet at the top released after the door flexed and complained, the door shaking as she flung it open. Kasara grunted. Let's just say, family differences. Want to talk about it? I pressed, thinking I could delay her departure a little longer, even if the door couldn't. Nah, Kasara chuckled. Not in the mood. See you later, Padre. I'm a missionary, not a priest. I corrected. Freeze, puta! The officer from inside shouted, now sporting a rifle. Kasara looked more annoyed than anything else. Oh, now you're a big man. Put the gun down, if you want to fuck around. The officer shouted, On your knees, puta! He glanced at me. The both of you, or I'll blow your fucking heads off. I was about to comply when I could feel heat rising from behind me. Kasara's fists were clenched, and I could see heat waves rising from them. If you don't put that toy down, you're going to regret it. The officer opened his mouth to say something, but in the next moment his head exploded. My eyes went wide as his eyes burst out his head with the rest of his skull vaporizing into a fine mist. His body remained standing for a moment before it collapsed. From the distance, I heard the echo of a massive gunshot. Kasara's eyes were wide. Get down! She shouted as she grabbed me, and we ducked behind a large rock not far from the hospital as a bullet whizzed by my head. Kasara and I's back were now against the rock. Fuck! How'd they find me? Kasara cursed under her breath. Who found you? I screamed, my heart hammering in my chest as I realized I was nearly shot. Kasara's head rested against the rock as she thought out loud. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. A bullet struck the rock we were hiding behind, followed by the loud crack of a gunshot a second or two afterwards. I almost got my head blown off back there. I'm open to anything. I shouted, slipping lower behind the rock, unsure of what was happening. Kasara peeked her head around the rock, looking out into the direction of the shots. Another bullet whizzed past me, striking the rock with barely a second behind the gunshot. Valkyries, Kasara said softly. Specifically, fucking Tanya. How the fuck can you be sure about who it... Wait, did you say Valkyries? I shouted in confusion as we heard the sound of a helicopter nearby. A shrill woman's voice called out over a loudspeaker. Surrender or face extermination. If you don't come out, I'm going to rain hellfire down on you, Kasara. I could hear the unmistakable sound of a helicopter drawing near. Yeah, that's the Major, Kasara growled. How the fuck did they find me? I've been off the grid for days. The officer did run that funky ID you have on you. I offered. Kasara flinched. She saw my ID. She picked up her wallet, pulling her ID out. Bloody hell, Kasara cursed. Fucking forgot I even had this stupid piece of shit. With that, she tossed the ID. Wait, don't you need that? I called out. I don't need anyone knowing I'm from Pentasil, Kasara said. Wind picked up. The sound of the helicopter now overhead dominated my attention. I was too terrified to even move from behind the rock, afraid my head was going to be the next to have a bullet tear it apart. Kasara stood up right in the open. Holy shit, get down. I shouted, trying to pull Kasara back to the ground as she looked up at the chopper overhead. It was then I realized it was right above us, and I tried to scramble to another location to get cover. They're not going to shoot me, Kasara shouted at me. Hey, Tanya, enough with the peace shooter. The shrill voice, I assume the voice of Major Tanya, or whoever, called out, Ha! Peace shooter? You never did appreciate the fine craftsmanship of the Athenian weaponsmiths. She continued to shout over a megaphone. Kasara once again didn't seem fazed by the fact someone had a rifle trained on her. Yeah, well, you know I'm an artist. I prefer to kick ass more naturally. So why don't you come down here and take me if you want? And give up my high ground advantage? What do you take me for, Cass? Major Tanya laughed. Surrender. Don't make me hurt you. Shitty way to treat a sister, don't you think? Kasara shouted. I scrambled toward the hospital before I tripped over my feet, tumbling to the ground as I turned to see a black helicopter flying overhead. Kasara's bravado quickly faded. How's about I target this worthless man, eh? Tanya's voice called out. Kasara's fist clenched, the heat waves rising upwards from her fist again. Lead him out of it. He's just a missionary, a medic. An enemy combatant is an enemy combatant, Kasara. We are at war, after all. Glorious, long-awaited war. Tanya's voice called out. That's when I saw a massive rifle barrel poke out of the helicopter's side door. My eyes went wide as I saw the barrel pointed right at me. Wait. Surrender or the missionary goes to see his pathetic God, Tanya declared. I tried to scramble for some kind of cover, but I was still out in the open. With a deafening shout, Kasara roared. The air around her grew hot. so hot that I could feel it on my face from Kasara's direction. As I felt the heat, a shock wave erupted from Kasara's body. Following the shock wave was a shift in air pressure. I could feel the air grow chaotic as wind from the helicopter blades and Kasara's outburst mixed and swirled, kicking up dust and debris. The helicopter began to waver and lose altitude. "Keep this thing in the air, you idiot." I heard Tanya's frantic voice call out as the helicopter spiraled out of control. I rushed to the doors of the hospital, looking on in shock as the helicopter dropped too low and at too steep of an angle. Someone leapt from the side door of the helicopter to a building roof before rolling off and down onto the ground. The helicopter continued to spin out of control until it smashed into the tree line. Kasara was now on one knee, looking winded. I rushed toward her, unsure what was happening, but trying to see if I could help in some way. "Kasara?" I shouted, rushing to grab her. As I touched her, my hand felt as if I had just grabbed a stovepipe. Kasara pushed me away before I could even react, knocking me on my ass, her eyes glowing red. "Back off!" I looked to my palm, realizing it was slightly burned. I heard Tanya's voice calling out to us, boots falling against the ground nearby. I knew there was a reason the Empress was interested in bringing you home. Royal Guard Kasara. I turned, expecting to see some crazy huge Amazon warrior taller than Kasara and twice as broad. Why did she require me to do a double take? Wearing a rather proper set of gray camouflage fatigues was a woman with short blonde hair and bright blue eyes. She looked like a waif of a thing, barely standing over 150 centimeters. A blue beret on her head with a strange symbol on it I had never seen before. It looked like an omega symbol with 3 arrows piercing it, all pointing downward. Kasara got to her feet, still winded. "Oh, fuck you, Major. You're licking the new queen's boots that hard." Tanya grinned with an absolutely maddened expression, her eyes wide and pupils dilating. "It is Empress. A queen only holds dominion over a single queendom. Our new Empress shall take the world as ours. She is a conqueror. How could you possibly leave at the dawn of our finest hour?" Kasara pointed to Tanya. "You asked me that question when you're all talking like that. That's pretty much why I want no part of this warmongering bitch's craziness." Tanya giggled at first, then went into full-blown maniacal laughter, placing her gloved hand over her eyes as if to hide them. The great Royal Guard Kasara abandons her post and her family, all because she's a coward. Kasara's lip curled up in anger. "I'm not a coward because I don't want to go marching off to a war I don't agree with." Tanya's hand moved from her vicious blue eyes. "Your mother would disagree. The general is more than happy to acquiesce to the new Empress's grand design." Kasara dashed forward, fists clenched, rushing the small woman. Tanya whipped out a pistol, firing at Kasara's feet. I shouted as the bullet ricocheted off the ground in front of Kasara's feet and through one of the windows nearby. Tanya then pulled a large hunting knife from her side. Despite the tiny woman being hardly half of Kasara's size, she was prepared. She held the hunting knife under the handle of her pistol, with the pistol still at the ready. "Come at me, Cass," Tanya shouted. "I'm sure the Empress will forgive me if I return you with only a few little holes." Kasara glared at her. "You gotta hit me first, you little hesty." Tanya took aim, but before she could, Kasara closed the distance, knocking the gun away, causing Tanya to fire the pistol off to the side. I took cover as best I could as Tanya continued to attempt to fire at Kasara, but Kasara parried the gun each time. Despite parrying the gun, Tanya would use her knife to keep Kasara at a decent enough distance, jabbing it forward just before pulling the gun on Kasara again. After the 4th shot, Tanya didn't reposition her gun, but rather lunged forward, jabbing Kasara in the thigh. "Bitch!" Kasara shouted, spinning back to kick Tanya's hand hard enough to knock the gun from it. The gun clattered to the ground, and I dove on it. Kasara then grabbed Tanya on either side of her head, eyes wide in rage. "Tell the Empress to leave me the fuck alone," Kasara shouted as she slammed Tanya's head onto the knee of her injured leg. Tanya bounced off Kasara's knee and crumbled to the ground, knocked out cold. I swallowed hard, still shaking from the encounter. Fuck. I rushed into the hospital and grabbed a field medical kit, running to Kasara. The large hunting knife was still shoved into Kasara's thigh, blood seeping from around the edges. Kasara grabbed the handle, flinching as she did so. I can't believe that Hesty stuck me. I pulled out gauze and considered the stab wound. What the fuck is a Hesty? It's a weak, tiny little housewife. Kasara growled through gritted teeth. Insult for a warrior, okay? Kasara screamed as she pulled the knife out her thigh. Fucking nutjob bitch. Kasara continued a slew of profanities as she squeezed the knife wound closed. I wrapped her leg in gauze as tightly as I could. Hang on, we'll get you inside. Luckily, the knife didn't hit an artery. The blood was copious, but not gushing. Fuck that. Kasara said, standing painfully, the second I had wrapped the wound. There's going to be more coming. Tanya just got here first because she was in a hello. I gotta go. You can barely walk. I shouted. Kasara then glanced over to Jeep. So, sailing to Haiti, huh? Can you drive? I growled under my breath. If you're absolutely refusing any other dash, how much for a ticket there, Padre? Kasara asked. I narrowed my eyes on her, knowing I was going to be riding the boat for free as I was a missionary. For you? $20. I met a drifter who walked out of the Darien Gap. Part 3. Sometimes getting places early is a good thing. I hadn't planned on arriving at my port of call until tomorrow. I certainly hadn't planned on dragging a woman, a good 20 centimeters taller than me, into a Jeep and driving as fast as I could to get there. I pulled the Jeep up to a parking lot, leaving a voice message with the hospital staff about where their Jeep was. I hoped they wouldn't be terribly upset as I slipped the keys under the Jeep's carpet, as I said in my instructions. You're a very polite car thief, Kasara remarked as I opened her door. I didn't steal it, I argued as I helped her to her feet. Her hand covered her injured thigh as she moved. Fuck, Kasara cursed. Tanya, you bitch. Seems like you have some practice in. You got a shitload to explain, by the way. I informed. That's the price of the boat ride. Kasara growled. Then give me my $20 back. Maybe. I offered as I looked over the docks at the port, trying to find where Junior is. Sure enough, I spotted his boat, a mid-sized cargo boat that was offloading supplies from Jamaica, then off to Haiti with medical supplies. Kasara looked at the boat as we approached. Well, I'm not going to say I expected a cruise liner, but Kasara's eyes were drawn to the hull of the older ship. The whole thing was some shade of green and white. The white upper decks were stained with rust here and there, with paint peeling along rusted rivets near the railing. The hull appeared sturdy, but the red paint at the waterline was peeling with rust stains as the waves slapped against its sides gently at the dock. The boat was parallel to the dock, with forklifts rolling up a large ramp to push large pallets into rows at the center. There the crew worked to tie down each pallet and secure tarps over them. The boat was too small for typical containers, so it lacked its own crane, but it made it just the right size for small deliveries. This boat is going to make it there, right? Kasara asked. Well, charities have to take what they can get. I explained, heaving onto the gangway, which was a single plank with a few worn patches of grip tape applied at the bottom. As we got on board, I heard a man with a thick Haitian accent shout, Bonjour, Mizai. I smiled as I saw the boat's captain. His eyes were yellowed, and he had far more sense than teeth. His hair was short, his face wrinkled from his time at sea. That said, his shirt was well pressed, bleached, and he wore a rather stereotypical captain's hat, which was white with the insignia of Haiti on the front. He was an older Haitian man who I only knew as Junior. Junior, I shouted, smiling and grabbing his hand, hugging him shortly after the handshake. How's the water? The water's always there. So far she hasn't taken me yet. Junior laughed, looking at Kasara. Oh, who dis? Oh, Kasara, this is Junior, our ticket to Haiti, I said as I introduced Kasara to Junior. Kasara looked at Junior oddly. Junior? Junior smiled, shaking Kasara's hand heartily. Yes, I assure ya, my father, he's much older. That's why they call I'm senor, he said with a broad laugh. Kasara cleared her throat, trying to force her smile away. So, where did Davy find such a woman, eh? Junior asked. looking Kasara up and down and then turning to me. "Y'all know there ain't no way y'all can satisfy this one, y'all. She kill y'all." Kasara recoiled. "No, we aren't. No." "Well, don't act so insulted." I laughed. "I'm not that bad, my." Junior grinned, leaning on a railing of the ship, his hands draped over the side. "Ah, my pale friend. Sometimes the ladies, they want more den looks, eh? Need a man who can go the distance, yeah?" He laughed, turning to Kasara and looking her up and down. "And sometimes, they don't need us at all, no?" Kasara gave Junior a nod. "Yeah, that a problem?" Junior laughed. "It's none of me business what y'all do with y'allself. Just don't rock my boat, eh?" Junior let out a deep laugh as he walked over to me, checking a clock hanging near the wheelhouse. "Y'all far too early, dear Davy. What's our rush, huh?" I cleared my throat. "We had to leave early." "Oh, we?" Junior asked with a smile. "So now it's we're gonna need a ride, eh? The deal was I take your scrawny pale ass across the Gulf to Haiti, not her brawny ass." He turned to Kasara. "No offense, BB." Kasara narrowed her eyes on Junior's. "No offense, as long as you don't call me BB again." "Apologies, mon amour," Junior said as he bowed. "How y'all like me to call y'all den?" "Cass is fine, Captain," Kasara corrected. "Ha ha." Junior shouted out in a deep laugh. "Oh, I like this one." She called me Captain. Junior shouted, placing both hands over his heart dramatically before he turned to me, treating me with respect, like she know me. He laughed, turned to her. "Lucky you, y'all don't." He laughed again, his tone dropping as he did. "I'm sure she'll get to know you on the trip," I said with a smile. "I hope not. I want Erta like me, yeah." Junior laughed. "I be fueling up for the next hour, so till then find her quarters down below. Cass can take the one next to ya. Could use another pair of hands on this old boat, y'all know? Just, don't think about pay, no?" Junior said with a toothless grin. I looked at Kasara. "I think she's just happy for the free ride." "Aye," Junior shouted, his tone shifting immediately to a more serious and dire one. "Ain't nothing in this life free. Everything costs something," he turned to Cass. "Just depends what you're willing to part with, no?" Kasara narrowed her eyes on Junior as I motioned for her to follow me below deck. "Gotta make sure day payment is right, ya, Cass?" Junior asked rhetorically as we headed below deck. Once we were moving down the steps and through the tight crew quarters, I turned to Kasara. "Sorry about him, he speaks his mind and is honest, it's fine." Kasara shrugged. "Free ride, and he wants it to work, I guess? I'm fine with it. Besides, I gotta do something on this boat. I doubt it's got satellite TV. Be happy it's got a radio." I laughed. Kasara sighed as we got to our quarters. It was not much. Basically a closet with a bunk bolted onto the side of the hull, with some sheets and what I hoped was a clean enough bed. Kasara glanced into the one next door, sighing, "Lovely accommodations. You could just walk further north," I reminded. Kasara glanced at her injured leg and growled, "It's fine." She relented as she limped to her bed and had a seat. "Guess I'll knock out for a bit. Wake me when Captain Junior needs us." I laughed as I checked my bed for any stowaways like mice or insects. True enough to his word, Junior put us to work. Kasara worked as best she could without opening up her knife wound, and I redressed her thigh daily. Each day, she was getting better. I should be happy the knife that Tanya stabbed Kasara. It was sharp, and luckily didn't hit the bone. Still, Kasara wasn't the fastest on board, and I spent half my time keeping an eye on her, making sure she was off the leg as much as possible. Luckily, outside of checking gauges, adjusting some minor rigging that came loose, and helping to prep dinner, there was not much physically intensive work to do yet. It was going to be a long trip from Panama to Haiti. It was a dull and tedious 4-day journey to our first port, Kingston, Jamaica. From there, it was a quick refueling, reshuffling supplies, and heading out to Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Junior was quick once we moored up to the docks. "Let's get dem skids unwrapped and ready for unloading. Faster we done, air the faster we can get to the next port." "Ah?" he shouted. Kasara and I weren't the only crew, and we were soon undoing cargo netting and working to find the pallet jack. Something no crew member could figure out. I growled, "Come on, guys, it's around here somewhere." The man with the forklift loaded us in Panama. One crew member, KO, shouted. He was Jamaican and had the accent to match. To know where they stowed the damn jack. Kasara rolled her eyes, moving to one pallet. "This shit has to go?" I nodded. "Yeah, it's gotta go, but I guess we're stuck until forklift guys can free the next row out." I complained, looking over the first row of pallets we had unbuckled from the cargo hold and spotting the others behind them. "Can you guys climb over the pallets that we unloaded and get the next ones ready?" I shouted, finding it too difficult to heave myself over. The two guys I was yelling at were skinnier than me. "We gotta wait, man." "Chill," the other fellow, Candace, said. I think he was from Belize, if I recall. Kasara growled, "Fuck this shit. I want to get going." Kasara adjusted her gloves and grabbed at the bottom of one of the pallets where the forklifts would normally lift from. Cass, what are you doing?" I asked. "Working," Kasara said as she bent her knees, grunted and lifted the pallet up on its edge a few centimeters. From there, Kasara dragged the pallet backwards, towards the loading dock and right up to the ramp. As she dragged it, wooden splinters and bits of the pallet snapped and popped off, but the entire thing remained mostly in one piece. Kasara gently set the pallet down and then moved to the next one. "Come on, you lazy fucks. Start on the next row. I got this shit," Kasara said as she dusted off her hands and moved to the next one. Cast your leg, Dash." I tried to protest. "It's fine," Kasara growled as she grabbed the next pallet by its edge. "As long as these cheap-ass pallets don't fall apart." Kasara grunted as she tilted the next pallet up and began to drag it out. The two other crew members just shrugged and began to unbind the next set of pallets. After Kasara handled the first two rows of the four we had to pull off, we found the pallet jack shoved into one of the pallets in the third row. I shook my head. Figures. Kasara cracked her back, then her knuckles, grabbing the pallet jack. "Fucking finally!" she shouted as she dropped the forks and rolled a rusty and well-used hand jack over the two rows she had moved to the ramp. "Now, let's get this shit onto the docks." After 2 hours of us unloading, the dock workers finally showed up in their forklifts to cart off the cargo we had unlocked and uncovered. Kasara and I waited on the docks as she leaned against a pylon. I sat on the locked hand cart. Well, I patted the hand cart. This made things easier. Kasara nodded. "I figured it had to be buried in there somewhere. Worked in a warehouse before?" I asked. "Everyone needs a starting job," Kasara stated as we watched the forklifts begin loading new pallets of medical supplies into the cargo hold. Having finally taken the pallets we had unloaded away. "Pretty impressive," I chuckled. "Doing that by hand? Meh," Kasara said with a shrug. "If my leg wasn't hurt, I'd have dragged him down the ramp the whole way. Those little ridges on the ramp would have torn the shit out of the pallets," Kasara chuckled. "Pissed off my old forewoman when I pulled that shit back home. Got on my case about not breaking the skids." Kasara had been pretty tight-lipped the whole journey about her origins, so I took this opportunity to pry. "So, mind telling me about where you're from?" Kasara's eyes were on the boat. I could see Junior surveying the loading dock area, unsure if his eyes were lingering on us or not. "Nah," Kasara said as she pushed herself off the dock pylon, moving to the pallet jack and motioning for me to get off of it. "Maybe later." Kasara wheeled a hand jack up the loading ramp and onto the boat, where she pushed into the first row of pallets and locked in place, helping the crew to secure the new payload. As I headed back on board, Junior called out to me, "Davy, meet me on the bridge. We leaving for the sunset." I nodded to Junior as I climbed up the loading ramp and pulled it back onto the boat, locking it in place with Candace and KO'd. Once they locked it up, they worked on ensuring the cargo was covered in netting and tarps before we unmoored and set sail once more. I headed away from the cargo area of the boat toward the bridge, climbing up the steps until I reached the top, where Captain Junior sat in a chair near the controls. I looked over the radio, steering wheel, and navigation systems, all handled by Junior and the rest of the crew. "Ya girl a power lifter?" Junior asked. "She used to work in a warehouse, I think." I shrugged. "We find her?" Junior asked. "Why do you ask?" I pressed. "'Cause she's on me boat," Junior said, now serious as he leaned forward. And if and I are any further, y'all tell me about her, y'all. I sighed, pulling up a seat near him. What's to tell? I found her in Panama. She was running from someone. They caught up to us, got into a scuffle, and we got out of there. Junior nodded. So, she ain't from Panama? I shook my head. Where she come from? Junior asked again. And don't fuck with me. Tell me the truth, yeah? I don't know. She showed up out of the Darien Gap, okay? I confessed. Junior paused, his brow furrowing as he got up and shut the door to the bridge before walking back and returning to his seat. From the Gap? Junior questioned. I nodded. Not through it, but from it? Junior asked again. I'd assume through. She can't be from the Darien Gap. There's nothing there. I paused, my stomach dropping slightly, right? Junior pulled out a pack of cigarettes and bit the end of one of the cigarettes out of the pack with his teeth before he offered me one. I declined as he shrugged and lit his cigarette. I've seen things. Like, I asked, there's a difference between someone going through the Gap and someone from the Gap. Junior's eyes locked on mine. This person who chased ya, she a woman? Oh, course, yeah. I nodded. Military? Junior asked. My stomach sank. Why, yes. Junior grabbed me by the collar of my shirt, pulling me close to him, his yellowed eyes glaring into mine. Ya fucking tet zozo. Ya done cursed me with this fucking stowaway. Now ya got me carrying a Pennsylvanian fugitive. Fucking liar. Junior shouted at me. I ought to toss a lot of ya overboard. W8. I stammered. I didn't lie to you. Oho didn't lie, no? Junior dropped me back into my chair as he got to his feet, walking around my seat. Ya hid the truth from me. That's enough to count as a lie in me book, ya? Could have told me this woman wasn't no friend of yours. Where she come from. Instead, ya bring this curse on me vessel? What curse? I shouted. Listen, I was just helping her, okay? This crazy woman was after her. Said they wanted her back, or whatever. They killed a cop, okay? So we ran. Junior moved behind me, and I heard the distinct sound of a blade being drawn. Soon enough, Junior had a machete tapping against my shoulder. Ain't no reason fair me to consider not dicing both of y'all up and tossing you overboard. Except that folks already seen y'all with me. Junior said as he sat down in his chair, cigarette in one hand, machete in the other. Who are these Pennsylvanian people you keep talking about? I asked, trying to change the topic. I promise you, I don't know shit about any of this, okay? I wasn't trying to bring you any trouble, Junior. Naive fucking bland. Junior shook his head and sighed. Hey! I shouted, glaring at him. I'm Honduran, man. If it looks like a bland, and it talks like a bland, Junior said as he pointed his machete to my chest. It's bland. My stomach sank at Junior's assertion. Y'all want to know about Pentosil? Fine. I tell ya. He took a long drag from his cigarette, dropping his machete. Yeah, I don't want to know shit about Pentosil. Junior shouted. Why is that? I asked. 'Cause the less y'all know, the better. Junior said as he twisted and turned the machete in his lap, the light from the windows flashing off the blade and into my eyes occasionally. It's the Gap's best-kept secret. Anyone who find a city, they never come back. They say the jungle claim, and but those who know, we know the truth. Junior shook his head. Yeah, don't fuck around with these women, mon. Every one of them is a warrior. Like a tribal warrior? I asked, thinking of Native Americans and such. No, like military. Junior clarified. So, soldiers. I reasoned. No. Junior laughed. There's a big difference between a soldier and a warrior. A soldier, they go to war and they come back. They want to live a normal life. Do they normal things get a job? Have a family. Junior took another deep drag. A warrior? They want to go back to war. They want to make their children warriors. They want to die in battle, in what they call glory. Junior whispered. That girl y'all brought? I could see it in her eyes. She's a warrior, a killer. She's perfectly at omen blood and death. If writing else, it's a distraction, Junior explained. She's running from that. I informed, I might not know much, but The girl I heard her fighting was said something about an empress. A new one? Kasara said she didn't want any part of the war. That's why she left. Junior paused, concern growing on his face, wrinkles forming his brow as he looked at me. War? What war? Day Queen is an isolationist. Only sometimes do decent sane warriors go fight in other nations' battles, like mercenaries for hire. Mercenaries? Who pays for warrior women to fight for them? I asked. Junior laughed. Who's fighting a group o' people who think women ought to be wearing scarves and marrying men? I frowned as I considered what Junior was implying. But what do y'all mean there's a new queen in a war? Junior asked. I don't know, man. This Major Tanya said the new queen wanted to be called Empress or some shit, that there would be war. I sighed. I thought she was crazy. Junior reached over to a radio, picking it up and calling out, Candace, bring me Cass. He hung up the radio without waiting for a reply. Why do you want her? I asked, my eyes drawn to the large machete in Junior's lap. 'Cause y'all weren't lying, Junior said as he got to his feet. Y'all don't know shit. I sighed in relief. But let's see what Cass is willing to tell us, Junior said, as he slid the dull end of the machete under my chin, forcing me to look up at him. Yeah? I swallowed hard as Junior moved his machete back and forth under my chin, and I was thankful it was a backside. Still, it wouldn't take much to flip it over and slice me. Kasara and Candace walked in, and Kasara spotted Junior with a blade at my throat. What the fuck? Candace, leave us be, Junior said. Candace left without a word. Hey, Kasara. I called out. Junior turned to Kasara, pointing the machete at her. Why y'all running from Penthesil? Tell me why Alda continue faring Yatu across the Gulf. Kasara heaved a sigh. Did he tell you anything? The Bland don't know shit, Junior snapped. But he know enough to get him and me killed. Now, tell me why you running. Kasara shook her head. Yeah, tell me, or Davy gets his AD shorter, Junior said, tapping the machete blade on the top of my head. I damn near shit myself. I knew Junior for some time, and I knew not to antagonize him or ask him what was in his cargo, but I never imagined he would get violent if I angered him. Kasara was silent for a moment or two before she leaned against the doorway. You got any more cigarettes? Maybe a beer? Junior tossed a pack of cigarettes at Kasara before he walked around the bridge to a small fridge, pulling out a trio of small silver and red cans. Kasara took hers and popped it open, taking a swig before Junior offered her his already lit cigarette. She lit hers from his still hot cherry and passed the cigarette back to him. Junior had a seat in his chair, motioned Kasara. Spill it, Cass. Kasara heaved a heavy sigh. Things were the usual, okay? Then this bitch showed up. Kasara shivered. She cut through our defenses like nothing. Had a pair of women with her that. They had abilities that. Kasara shook her head. Mages. They were mages. Junior sat there, shockingly unfazed as Kasara explained everything. Bitch burst into the throne room like nothing. Kasara said, I threw a punch at her and it was like hitting a brick wall. Then the queen surrendered the whole city to her. This woman Dash, Junior began but was cut off. She wasn't a woman, Kasara explained. The new Empress of Penthesil? She's a black-winged angel, and she goes by the name Ragna. Story 5. Someone wants to play chess with me. I should have stayed focused. I never cared much for chess. It always felt like something ancient and impenetrable, like a church sermon in a language I didn't speak. I thought it was a thing for quiet minds who didn't care for long silences, and relatives who knew how to sit in the same room without needing to fill it. That wasn't me. I grew up on noise. My entire childhood consisted of video games, loud dinners, and anxiety. But then came the Queen's Gambit. I'm sure you've heard of it. Honestly, I didn't even mean to start watching it. Emily put it on one night while I was half scrolling through my phone, the way you do when you're not really trying to be present. But something about the show pulled at me. The weight of the pieces, the precision of each move, The way silence had become tension, and tension, somehow, beauty. I watched one episode, then another, then all of them. By the end of the week, I'd ordered a cheap wooden board online. I started watching tutorials late into the night, playing games against bots that beat me 10 times before I finally won once. And when I did win, as in when the bot somehow blundered, I felt something bloom in my chest. A mix of control and elegance. I enjoyed playing, and I started getting quite invested. It became a quiet ritual. I just played a few games before bed. It was a hobby. The email arrived on a Tuesday, a gray one, the kind where the clouds feel like they're pressing on your skin. I just finished eating cold leftovers, something truly forgettable, and was curled up on the couch with Emily, half listening to her talk about weekend plans while my thumb scrolled thoughtlessly across the screen. Then I saw it. Subject: care for a game? Smiley face. No sender. No address. Just that single line and a link. I showed it to Emily. That's a weird one. Probably a scam. Don't click random links, she said, brushing hair from her face. But I did. It was dumb, I know. I tapped the screen without really thinking. Maybe because the message was way too uncommon, and I was being way too curious. The screen blinked once, and there was black background, a chessboard with pieces on it. Extremely minimalistic. No ads, no buttons. Just 2 words at the top of my screen. Your move. I hovered for a second, then played e4. King's pawn, a very standard opening. Safe. The bot responded with e5, equally standard. We went back and forth for a few moments. My moves careful and cautious. Its replies cold and immediate. After about 15 moves, I slipped. A lazy trade. 1 pawn down. Annoyingly enough, the top of my screen was showing a sad face emoji, as if trying to taunt me. I sighed, turned my phone off, and immediately felt the weight behind my eyes. That heavy, syrupy exhaustion that doesn't grow slowly but lands all at once. I'm gonna crash, I muttered. Emily didn't look up. Don't let it keep you up all night. I barely made it to the bedroom before I passed out. Clothes still on, my phone still in my hand. I woke up to 6 missed calls from David, the father of one of my best friends. At first, I thought it was a pocket dial or maybe a favor he needed. Something benign. But the voicemail I listened to was just 5 seconds of silence, followed by a breath. A shaky inhale, like someone trying not to cry. I called him back with my heart already sinking. The words came slowly, like they were trying not to be said. It's about Josh. There was an accident. Josh and I were very close. He had been in a car crash late last night. He wasn't even drunk, lost control on a curve, was probably driving slightly too fast. The police said it was quick, no suffering, like that somehow made it easier to hold. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone still in my hand, and stared at the wall for 15 minutes. My ears were ringing. I felt completely hollowed out. Then, mechanically, I opened my phone's browser. The website on which I was playing the game last night was still there. It took me what felt like ages to make sense of the new message lingering at the top of the screen. Every move counts. Smiley face. Story 6. I took a job at a strange film studio. They're not just making movies. Part 1. I'd been out of work for over a year. At first, I told myself it was just a rough patch, a dry season. Everyone goes through them, right? I sent out resumes like flares into the dark. No replies, no interviews, just the occasional automated rejection that landed in my inbox like a death knell. But as the weeks crawled by, then months, the silence took on weight. Heavier, meaner. Every resume I sent felt smaller than the last, like a paper boat tossed into a black sea. I'd come out of film school starry-eyed and full of fire, convinced I was destined for something bigger. I wanted to make something that mattered, something people would remember. I wanted to carve my name into the bones of cinema history. Movies were always more than entertainment to me. They were sacred. I grew up on the floor in front of a flickering TV, curled up next to my brother with a blanket and a bowl of popcorn too big for our arms. Silly movies at first, but when I got older, my brother introduced me to the world of true cinema, as he used to put it. Sunday matinees turned into nighttime marathons. Spielberg, Carpenter, Kubrick, even the weird Lynch stuff that made us laugh before it started to terrify us. After my brother passed, I clung to film even harder, editing, writing, shooting short scenes with borrowed gear. Grief turned into drive. It felt like the only way to keep him with me, by chasing the dreams we used to share in the dark. But dreams are expensive, and idealism only pays in heartache. Instead, I found myself cutting together strangers' wedding reels for cash, watching hours of champagne toasts and choreographed dances, while feeling like a ghost pressing his face against a glass of a world he couldn't enter. By month 3 of unemployment, I was bleeding savings. By month 6, I was pawning gear like heirlooms, my LED kit, my camera dolly, even the Super 8 I promised myself I'd keep forever. That one hurt the most. It was a camera I used to shoot our first home movie, the one where we made our backyard look like the end of the world. That reel's probably in a box somewhere now. Dusty, forgotten, kinda how I started to feel like. Eventually, I stopped hearing back from job applications altogether. Not even rejections, just that sickly void of nothing, the kind of silence that feels personal. I wasn't a filmmaker anymore. I was someone who used to talk about film the way other people talk about religion. And then I found it, a listing buried deep in a job site I didn't even remember bookmarking. Every listing on the site was for something creative. Screenwriters, editors, set designers, concept artists, actors. But the jobs weren't posted by companies. Just names. Vague, sometimes poetic, sometimes deranged. Seeking sculptor of memory. Actor wanted, must be comfortable with going the extra mile. Sound designer needed for memory reenactment, unpaid. Most of the listings read like either performance art or elaborate pranks, like they'd been written by lunatics or theater kids on absinthe. But still, there was something about it. Something sincere under all the madness. The listing that caught my eye simply read, creative assistant wanted, film industry. No experience necessary. Must be willing to go the distance for true art. I stared at the screen longer than I'd like to admit. It was a small local movie company that I had never heard about, which was odd, because I thought I knew just about everything there was to know about the local scene. That line, go the distance for true art, clung to something deep in me. It was pompous, dramatic, and weirdly honest. I almost clicked away. I hovered over the tab, ready to close it out, maybe refresh Indeed again, look for another barista job I wouldn't get called back for. But then I thought about all the nights I'd sat alone watching Tarkovsky films with frozen pizza and debt notices, all the half-finished screenplays on my hard drive no one would ever read. So I clicked apply. I gave it my all on this. I made a personal resume and a motivated application that went into details about my passion for films, about my willingness to go the distance for true art. Then I hit send. 2 days later, I got a reply. One line, we'd like to meet you. Attached, an address to a warehouse space on the edge of town. Intrigued by the sheer weirdness of it all, I decided to give it a try. The building didn't look like a studio, not from the outside. More like an abandoned office block tucked behind a shuttered hardware store and an old coin laundry. The kind of place you'd expect to find leaking pipes, flickering lights, and mice, not filmmakers. I stepped inside, and the air hit me immediately. Cold and damp, tinged with something chemical and metallic, like old developer fluid or blood on copper. The lobby was mostly empty, save for a dead plant in the corner, and a buzzing overhead light that looked like it might shake loose from the ceiling at any second. A woman in all black, slim, pale, clipboard clutched tight to her chest, emerged from behind a narrow door without making a sound. Her smile was polite, but her eyes weren't smiling. "Follow me," she said. The hallway she led me down was too quiet. Carpet muffled every step. Somewhere deep in the building, I thought I heard someone singing, slow, off-key, and childlike, but the sound vanished as quickly as it came. She led me into a narrow room with a folding table and 3 chairs, one of which I was clearly meant to take. 2 people already sat across from it, a man and a woman, late 40s, maybe, sharp clothes, hollow faces. They looked exactly how you'd expect indie film producers to look. If someone had described them to a sculptor who'd never met a human being before, everything about them was a little off. Their hair too perfect, their smiles too tight, their eyes too wide and wet, like they hadn't blinked in a while. "Thank you for coming," the man said. His voice was deep and slow, like he was choosing each word from a locked drawer. The woman nodded and slid a piece of paper toward me. Blank. "We won't need your resume," she said. "We're not looking for experience, just conviction." The question started normally enough. "What's your favorite film? What kind of stories do you want to tell? What directors inspire you?" I answered the best I could, though I felt stupid halfway through. Like the questions weren't really for information. They were watching how I answered, not what I said. Studying my mouth, my eyes, my posture. Then the questions started to shift. Have you ever cried during a film? What scene? What did it take from you? Have you ever watched someone die? What color were their eyes at the end? Do you believe pain can be beautiful? Their voices never rose. The woman took notes in long, looping strokes. The man leaned in slightly every time I hesitated. I was sweating, but I couldn't tell if it was from heat or fear. Then came the question that finally lodged in my gut. What is the worst thing that ever happened? Silence followed. They both leaned back in unison, like snakes waiting for a heartbeat to falter. I stared down at my hands. My mouth opened and I told them about my brother, about the hospital, about the last time I saw his face. I don't know why I said it. It spilled out of me like a confession I didn't know I was holding. The woman didn't blink. The man smiled, not kindly, but like he'd just tasted something sweet. "Thank you," the woman said softly. "You've shown us you're capable of truth." I left the room shaken. I should have walked away, but I didn't. Something about the way they listened, how they hung on every word. It stirred something. Shame, maybe, or curiosity, or a darker impulse I didn't want to name. By the next morning, I'd accepted the job. My first day was the following Monday. I was nervous, but also excited. The warehouse looked different in daylight, less ominous, somehow like a stage set after the audience had gone home. But the moment I stepped inside, that illusion peeled away. The place was deeper than I remembered, beyond the main hallway. The warehouse split into corridors that made no architectural sense. One curved subtly, disorientingly, and another led to a dead end that didn't appear to match the building's footprint from the outside. The air smelled like dust, paint thinner, and something faintly metallic. People moved throughout the space. Actors and staff, I assumed, but none of them spoke to me. A woman in a moth-eaten wedding dress stood barefoot in a corner, weeping into her hands. I turned to see if a camera crew was nearby, but there was no one filming. In another room, I heard a guttural scream, raw and too long. And when I stepped in, a young man sat cross-legged on the floor, laughing and crying at once, as though he couldn't remember which came first. No one stopped him. No one even looked concerned. Props and costumes were scattered across open tables and racks. I passed a mannequin head painted entirely black with human teeth glued along the jawline. A giant papier-mâché bird costume hung from the ceiling like a hangman. One room was full of shoes. Hundreds of mismatched shoes, sorted by size and style, none of them looking like they'd ever been worn on camera. In the hallway outside the black box studio, I passed a door secured with a rusted padlock. Behind it, something thumped, slow and rhythmic, like someone pacing. Or something heavier. A sound that didn't belong in any building, let alone one pretending to be a film studio. I paused. The sound stopped. When I leaned in, I could swear I heard breathing, wet deliberate, just on the other side of the door. Then a sharp knock. Once. I backed away. Fast. No one else reacted. A man walked by wearing a clear plastic mask smeared with fake blood, holding a VHS tape labeled Dream Footage 6B. He looked at me, winked, then vanished around the corner. Before I could ask questions, one of the men from the interview approached. The one in the turtleneck. "You're here. Good. Come." He led me down a long corridor. Halfway through, he paused at a rusted metal door with a strip of yellow tape across it. "Never go in here," he said casually, as if he were pointing out a mop closet. "That space is sensitive." I nodded. I didn't bother asking. We entered a small black box studio. Minimal lighting. An ancient camera setup that looked like it had been pulled from a forgotten film set in Europe. In the center of the room stood a crude living room mock-up, couch, lamp, cheap frame photos. A young actor sat slumped in the middle, hands trembling, eyes red. The director looked at me. "You'll assist today." I blinked. "Doing what?" He handed me a script. It was 1 page long. Scene 4, the moment of loss. A man receives news that his older brother has died in a hit-and-run. The man collapses. He screams. He does not stop screaming. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This is exactly like what I told you in the interview. I said. The man in the turtleneck nodded. "Yes, that's why we chose the scene." My mouth went dry. "You're using what I said." "No," he said, voice calm. "We're honoring it. This is what real art demands. Pain must be given shape or it rots. You're the only one who can help us make this moment real." I wanted to argue. I wanted to walk out. But I didn't. I needed this job. I needed something to matter again. So I helped. I gave notes. I coached the actor on how the grief hits in waves. How your body doesn't know what to do. How your hands twitch like they're searching for something to hold on to. And when he collapsed on the fake carpet, sobbing so hard his voice cracked, it felt real. Too real. I watched the scene again and again as they ran the takes. The sobbing, the silence, the scream. The scream never sounded quite the same. But they didn't want it to be perfect. They wanted it raw. When it was over, I felt hollowed out. On my way out, I passed a hallway where 2 of the crew whispered urgently in a language I didn't recognize. One of them noticed me and immediately stopped talking. He smiled too quickly. The other turned away and disappeared down a hallway marked archive. I didn't ask what the archive was. That night, I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, playing the scene back in my head. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been taken from me. But then I thought about the actor. His performance had been true, maybe uncomfortably so. Maybe that was the point. Maybe they were right. Maybe pain didn't need to be used. Maybe turning it into something beautiful was better than letting it rot inside you. I told myself I'd go in again tomorrow, just for a little longer, just until I could find my footing again. Day 2 began earlier than expected. I arrived to find a note duct taped to the inside of the front door. It read, in slanted handwriting, Studio 4. Be present. No distractions. Today is about pain. Studio 4 was farther into the building, tucked behind a corridor lined with black curtains and old reel canisters stacked like forgotten tombstones. I passed a man in a burlap sack mask who didn't acknowledge me. A woman walked barefoot down the hallway, whispering lines from King Lear to herself. Bloody gauze wrapped around her hands. The air in Studio 4 was dense and hot, like someone had turned the vents off hours ago. 2 bright key lights illuminated a modest living room set. Cracked wallpaper, a threadbare couch, old toys scattered across a stained carpet. In the middle stood a man in a wife beater and slacks, red-faced, barrel-chested, pacing. In the corner sat a girl, early 20s, maybe younger, her shoulders hunched. Her eyes were hollow. Her hair hung damp in front of her face. Her breathing was shallow. As I entered, one of the 3 producers from my interview appeared beside me, smiling like we were about to start a magic show. He handed me a clipboard. "You're helping direct this one," he said. "We want raw truth. No gloss. No barriers." I looked down at the notes. Scene objective, confrontation. Daughter refuses to forgive. Father escalates. Real-time reaction. Film until breaking point. My mouth went dry. Are they actors? I asked. "Method," he said, with a glint in his eye that didn't quite fit his tone. "They don't break character. Ever. They know the boundaries. They signed the waivers. They each lived through this. An abused daughter, an abusive father. It has to be as real as it can get. As if on cue, the man turned and slapped the girl hard across the face. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. She didn't cry out, just flinched, swallowed the pain, and stared up at him with trembling defiance. I staggered forward. "Hey, what the hell?" But the other producer caught me by the arm. "Do not interrupt," he hissed. "You'll ruin the take." That looked real. It was real. That's the point. I looked at the girl again. Her lip was bleeding. Just a little. Her eyes flicked toward me, pleading? Acting? I didn't know anymore. "Pain," the producer whispered. "It's how we dig down to the marrow. You said you were ready to go the distance, didn't you? We're all ready to bleed for art. If you're not, then maybe..." I flinched. I desperately needed this. And besides, these actors could walk out any moment. If they felt like it, they had signed up for this. And so had I. There was no way I was going back to editing people's wedding footage, or be subjected to the dreadfulness of endless rejection. They filmed the whole thing. Later, after the others had filtered out, some laughing like nothing had happened, others dead silent. I sat alone in the break room, a cup of coffee going cold in my hand. I hadn't taken a sip. The bitter smell made my stomach turn. That's when I saw her again, the actress from the scene. She moved past the doorway slowly, like she didn't want to be seen. Her face was turned slightly, but not enough to hide the faint swelling near her jawline. Or was it just shadow? She held her arm stiff, like it hurt to move. Her eyes caught mine for a split second, a flicker of doubt in her face, like she was trying to convince herself it had all been worth it. Like maybe, just maybe, the scene had cut deeper than she expected, and not just into her skin. Then she disappeared down the hall, leaving me alone with a silence that suddenly felt heavier. I told myself it had to be makeup, a trick of light, method acting pushed to the extreme. But doubt festered in the pit of my chest. And yet, even through confusion, the nausea, the dread, something inside me stirred. Something old, curious. I wanted to stay, not just because I needed the job, but because I was starting to understand why they called it true art. And that realization intrigued me. I wanted to know more. A sick curiosity gnawed at me. I wanted to see how far they were willing to go. Maybe even how far I was willing to go. The third day, things got even weirder. The morning began with an all-hands meeting in the screening hall, though no films were shown. Rows of plastic chairs faced a low stage where the studio's executives eventually emerged. 3 of them. I'd never seen them before, and something about them didn't sit right. They looked wrong. Faces too smooth, as if they'd been vacuum sealed in place. Skin waxy, almost artificial under the buzzing fluorescence. Their smiles were stiff, identical, too wide, showing too many teeth. They blinked too little, moved too slowly, like actors playing human beings for the first time and just barely getting it right. "Thank you for coming," said the one in the middle. His voice was oddly deep, like a dub track just slightly out of sync. "We know some of you are tired, maybe even confused." His smile never moved. "But that's good," he continued. "Doubt is part of the process. Doubt means we're near the edge of something meaningful. And the edge is where true art begins." The others nodded in perfect rhythm, like marionettes sharing one brain. "We ask for your trust. We ask that you keep giving yourselves to this work, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. In the end, every frame we capture will be proof that you mattered, that we mattered. This studio, you will make history." There was scattered applause. A few murmured affirmations. I clapped too, but my hands felt numb. I looked around, and it hit me. All of these people gathered here. I recognized the look in their eyes. I had seen it in the mirror. Desperation, a yearning to belong somewhere, somewhere that mattered, somewhere that made them someone. Afterward, I was handed a manila folder with today's scene assignment. I flipped it open, and my breath caught in my throat. 1 page, sparse dialogue. 2 boys seated on a living room floor, a blanket fort, crayons, plates of grilled cheese sandwiches cut into dinosaur shapes. My stomach dropped. I remembered it. I must have been 11. my brother Jeremy, was 17, older, cooler, already half-stepping into the world beyond me. But that day, none of that mattered. I'd been sick for days, curled on a couch under a fleece blanket, limbs aching, skin burning with fever, the kind of flu that makes the ceiling blur and the hours dissolve into static. Our parents were both at work, stretched thin and tired, but Jeremy stayed home. He said school could wait. He pulled the couch cushions to the floor and draped a blanket over 2 chairs, building a crooked little fort that glowed soft from within. He lined up a stack of dusty VHS tapes, The Iron Giant, Jurassic Park, The Princess Bride, and told me we were having a film festival. Just us. Sick days cinema. Then he disappeared into the kitchen. I could hear him clattering pans, muttering like a mad scientist. When he came back, he had a plastic plate in his hands. On were 2 grilled cheese sandwiches, each cut, messily but unmistakably, into the shape of dinosaurs. He held it out like a sacred offering. "Eat them fast," he said, eyes wide with mock seriousness, "or they'll eat you first." I laughed so hard I thought I'd puke. My head pounded, my throat burned, but for a few seconds none of that mattered. It was perfect. A small, silly moment wrapped in warmth and grilled cheese grease, and the safety only an older brother can give. That day became sacred in my memory, one of the few untouched by what came after, untouched by hospitals, by loss, by the long, hollow stretch of silence that followed his death. In that moment, Jeremy wasn't just my brother. He was the whole world. But the scene I held in my hands was not that memory. It wore its skin, but something was deeply, hideously wrong. The header at the top read, "Int, Blanket Fort Day, rough script, room for improv," just like it had been. The couch cushions, the blanket canopy, the soft glow from a flashlight balanced in a plastic bucket, a plastic plate of grilled cheese sandwiches, cut like dinosaurs. But then, older brother, 17, wide, smill as wide as you can. You have to eat all of them. You promised. Younger brother, 11. I don't want to. They look wrong. Older brother, guilting his younger brother. Sadness in tone, like a betrayal has happened. This was the best I could do. Don't you like it? But I made them just for you. All my love is in there. Stage direction. The younger boy hesitates. He picks up a sandwich. Bites. A crunch. Too sharp. He recoils. Blood spills from his mouth. Younger brother. Muffled. Panicking. It hurts. More blood. He opens the sandwich. It's filled with shards of glass. And then, older brother. Keep chewing. If you don't eat them fast, they will eat your soul. I could barely breathe. My eyes scanned further through the rest of the script as my stomach twisted in protest. It continued, coldly, precisely, describing how the boy tries to scream, but his tongue is already cut. How the brother sits back in the corner of the fort, watching, unblinking, smiling. Older brother, so indeed. The story doesn't end until the mouth is quiet. I gripped the folder tighter, the paper warping under my fingers. I wanted to tear it apart, burn it, but I couldn't stop reading. This was sacred. This memory, one of the last pieces of my brother that hadn't been warped by loss. A day I kept locked in a quiet corner of my mind, too precious to speak aloud. And yet, here it was, filleted, perverted. No one could have known. I'd never told anyone, not in interviews, not in therapy. But did I write in the blog I had at one point? I wasn't sure, but somehow they'd found it, and worse, twisted it into this abomination. I confronted one of the creative leads during break, the same man who'd asked me in the interview what the worst thing that ever happened to me was. He looked at me with wide, unblinking eyes. Calm, reverent. "We're not recreating your pain," he said. "We're giving it form, letting it breathe, so it can mean something more than just loss. Listen, I know this seems unconventional, but this is a meditation on how our memories are warped and turn into monstrous things when we process pain and loss. You must understand that on some level. You're such a creative force, so focused, you just have to let it out." It already meant something. I can't direct this monstrosity. He didn't argue, just nodded slowly. You wouldn't be here if you didn't believe in what we're doing here. Give it time. You'll understand. I wanted to scream, but I didn't, because part of me wanted to see how they'd do it, how close they'd get, how far they'd go. That part of me terrified me, but it also kept me in the room. They called action, and the air changed. The silence in the studio thickened. Too complete, like sound itself had been warned to stay away. A chill rolled down the back of my neck. Even though the lights above were sweltering, the set looked simple. A sagging blanket fort assembled from old chairs, frayed quilts, and dusty couch cushions. A child domain built for comfort, safety, but something about it was wrong. The way the shadows pooled under the blankets. The way the light refused to touch the far corners. It looked like my memory of the fort, but refracted, as if remembered by something that didn't quite understand love. 2 boys sat cross-legged inside, one older, one younger. The older one pushed forward a chip plate with 3 dinosaur-shaped sandwiches, peanut butter and jelly, crust trimmed poorly. It mirrored a day I remembered vividly. Jeremy and I, home alone. I was sick. He wanted to cheer me up. It had been warm, human, kind. This wasn't. Eat, the older boy said. His voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't anything. It was hollow, like something speaking through him. The kind of voice that doesn't come from the lungs, but from behind the eyes. The younger boy reached, hesitating. He picked up one of the sandwiches, a stegosaurus. Bit into it. He winced. Crack. Something shimmered in the jelly. Clear, sharp. The boy coughed and spat into his palm. A shard of glass, stained red. I jolted forward, but didn't move. Was it real? No one shouted cut. No one flinched. The crew stood still, watching, unblinking, reverent. The older boy leaned in, his voice a whisper. Keep eating. You're having pain for lunch. If you don't eat them, they'll eat your soul. My heart stopped. This felt so wrong. So why didn't I stop it? I looked around. One of the executives stood behind the camera, smiling thinly, hands folded like a priest at a ritual. His eyes never blinked. The white's too white. What is this? I whispered, but no one answered. I turned back to the monitor. The boy chewed another bite, trembling. Blood pooled along his gums. The older one sat stiff, eyes dark, unwavering. They weren't just acting. They were obeying, like their movements had been pulled from a string strung across centuries, like they had stepped into something old, something that used people the way a violin uses strings. The set hummed, not audibly, but deep down in the bones. A vibration, a tension. The air felt aware. I should have shouted. I should have pulled them out. Instead, I whispered, keep rolling, because something in me wanted to see. Something ancient, quiet, and buried had begun to rise. Curiosity? Hunger? Worship? True dedication to the art? I didn't know. I only knew that I couldn't stop watching. When the scene ended, no one applauded. No one exhaled. The boys left the set in silence, eyes unfocused, steps soft as sleepwalkers. Staff came in and cleaned up what I hoped was fake blood. And I stood there, heart pounding, ears ringing, knowing I crossed an invisible threshold. One of the producers clapped me on the back. You made something real today, he whispered. That's rare. Hold on to that. His hand lingered for a moment too long. I wanted to vomit. Instead, I nodded. That night, I sat awake until morning, replaying every detail, every line. I told myself what I had seen was wrong, that it hadn't been acting, but something entirely different, something deeply wrong. But a voice inside me whispered something else. You didn't stop it. You directed it, and part of you felt alive. I took a job at a strange film studio. They're not just making movies. Part 2, on the 4th day, We were all called into yet another assembly. They called it a creative alignment circle. No one warned me. The entire staff was herded into a wide, soundless studio space. One of the older ones with ceilings that stretched into shadow and walls that looked vaguely burned. There was a faint metallic smell in the air. Not blood, not quite, but something adjacent. The lights overhead buzzed in rhythmic pulses, like a heartbeat gone wrong. We sat cross-legged in a ring of mismatched chairs. No cameras, no phones, just silence and expectation. At the center stood one of the executives, the same man with a too smooth face, like his expression had been carved into place and then polished until no emotion could stick. He spoke slowly, in a tone so even it felt inhuman. Art lives in vulnerability, he said. True art is not safe. It is not gentle. It is not filtered through ego or fear or comfort. If you have come here to create safety, you've come to the wrong place. Then he smiled, not warmly. He pointed to a young man across from me, one of the camera techs. Barely more than a kid. Stand. The tech stood, trembling slightly. Who do you think is failing the art? The boy looked confused, then terrified. He tried to stammer something out, but the executive cut him off. Point to them. The room tensed. Slowly, the boy lifted his hand and gestured toward a woman sitting beside me, a production designer I'd shared lunch with once. She didn't want to redesign the set for the grief scene, he mumbled. Said it was exploitative, that it felt wrong. The woman's jaw clenched. Her eyes glinted, not with shame, but fury. She stood without being asked and snapped back, voice cold, and you filmed it without flinching, like it turned you on. The circle gasped. Some laughed. The executive clapped once. Loud. Good. More. And like that, the room turned. They called it feedback. But it was flaying. Every word was sharpened. Each critique cut with surgical cruelty. I watched soft-spoken costume designers eviscerate interns for cowardice. Editors accused actors of vanity. Someone called a director's trauma scene emotionally flaccid. And when it was my turn, I was ready to lie, to say something surface-level political. But I felt eyes on me, not just theirs. Something else, watching through them. I pointed to a middle-aged man with a quiet, scholarly demeanor. He hesitates before every take, I said, like he's scared of what might happen if the scene gets too real. He flinched, but nodded. A tear slid down his cheek. The circle moved on, and I hated how good it felt. How pure, like a poison finally leaving the blood. But as the exercise ended, I noticed something. No one had left the circle unscathed. Even those who delivered the harshest critiques had been wounded. There was no triumph, only thinning skin. I myself had been torn to shreds, but it only left a feeling in me that I could do better, like some unseen force had taken over, driving me onwards toward perfection. And when the executive dismissed us, his final words rang out like a benediction and a curse. Remember, creation and destruction are the same hand. Later, after the studio went dark, I wandered. I told myself I needed to clear my head, but something else pulled me. That strange, subtle magnetism I've been feeling all week, a gravity not of earth, but of meaning, as though the studio had its own soul, and it was drawing me to the parts it didn't want seen. I don't know what drew me to the door. I'd passed this hallway before, but I'd never noticed it. No signage, no keypad, just a warped wooden panel with a brass knob, half-turned, like it had been left ajar on accident or for someone. I paused, the whisper of something cold sliding down my back. Still, I opened it. The hinges groaned like something waking up. Inside, it was colder than it should have been, dry, still wrong. The air smelled of rust, mildew, and decayed paper. A single bulb swung faintly from the ceiling, casting a jaundiced flicker. At first, it looked like a prop room. Cluttered shelves, unlabeled boxes, scattered debris. But nothing felt fake. No paint, no foam, no signs these items were ever meant for a set. A child's red shoe sat on a shelf, caked in dried mud. Beside it, a teddy bear with a torn ear slumped forward, like it had been crying. A cracked pair of glasses lay atop a dust-covered book. I stepped in. The floor groaned. More objects appeared in the light. a broken necklace tangled with hair, a coat draped over a chair like someone had just stepped out, a shattered phone still pulsing with a missed call. No labels, no order, just loss. At the back, a corkboard stretched across the wall, pinned with dozens of photos. Faces, not actors. Men, women, children. Some smiling, some crying, some afraid, most unmarked. A few had notes beneath them. Gave everything. A spectacle. Pushed further than expected. Did not finish the scene. It hit me. This wasn't storage. This was a reliquary. A graveyard. These weren't props. They were remnants. Belongings salvaged not for use, but because they'd been offered. Sacrificed. In the corner, a dusty CRT television crackled to life. Static. Then a loop. A young man, fully clothed in a bathtub, rocking back and forth. I turned up the sound. Cut when I've given it all. Cut when I'm empty. Over and over. I backed away, breath shallow. This was where they kept what was left behind. Discarded lives. Trimmed truth. Memories shaved off like celluloid scraps. And still, I stayed. Because part of me knew. The script had already been written. And I was following it, beat for beat. On the 5th day, they asked me to act. Something small. Just you this time, said one of the producers that morning. Her lipstick too red. Her teeth too white. Her voice too calm, like she practiced sounding human in front of a mirror. A piece about silence, she said. A man confronting the absence of sound in the face of unspeakable terror. It sounded like nonsense, but so had everything else. So I nodded, because nodding was easier than asking questions. They called it Scene 47. The vow. No script, just a costume that wasn't a costume. A hoodie I hadn't worn since high school. My old sneakers. Same scuffs, same broken lace. These weren't replicas. They were mine. The set was a clearing in the woods, a near-perfect replica of the spot Jeremy, and I used escape to when home became too loud. We called it base camp. The smell was exact. Pine, wet leaves, distant wood smoke. The kind of sensory accuracy no budget could buy. The trees, though, were wrong. Too orderly, too still. But the dying light, that orange, late autumn sun slanting through branches, that was real, or it felt real enough. No one else was there. Just me, a replica of my old BMX, and the circle of mossy stones we once called the council. Then a voice from somewhere unseen crackled through. Just be in the moment. Let it come back. Say what you said that day. Remember what he told you. And I did. 15. Jeremy about to leave for college. One last ride to the woods. No dares, no jokes, just quiet. A shifting silence that smelled like endings. I'd asked him, voice trembling, "You'll still come back, right?" And he'd laugh, pointed to clearing. "I'll always be here, idiot. Right here. You come back and I'll find you." It was one of the last happy moments we shared. Pure, untouched. But what stepped from the trees wasn't Jeremy. It looked like him. Same gait, same cocky half-smile, but off. His eyes were too still. His smile stayed too long, like it was pinned in place. He didn't blink. He sat beside me, like Jeremy had, like the memory wanted him to. Actor as Jeremy. You know you can't stay here forever. Me hesitating. What? Actor, you keep coming back to this place, hoping to find something that's already rotted. My pulse spiked. That wasn't the line. That wasn't even close. But I didn't stop, because I couldn't. The trees leaned in. The shadows around the clearing deepened. Teeth hidden in the bark. The air itself buzzed, electric and wrong. Me, you said you'd always be here. Actor and I am. He grinned. Something cracked behind his teeth. You just didn't know what it would cost. He reached out. His hand was cold. Not memory cold. Not death cold. But something other. Ancient and hungry and pretending to be familiar. Tears slid down my face. Not on cue. Not for performance. Just real. The hidden voice returned, whispering through the branches. Good. That's it. Let it hurt. Let it bleed. And I did, because some part of me needed to see it through, to know how far it could go. The camera spun, unseen. The trees trembled with a low, droning hum, like the clearing had lungs, like the set itself was watching. Birdsong warped into human noise, language stripped of meaning, feelings laid bare. Give it all, bleed it for the frame. This is the altar. You are the offering. And I understood. It was never about performance. It was about sacrifice. Later that day, one of the executives pulled me aside. He wore the usual mask they all did. Face too smooth, smile too exact, like it had been rehearsed or printed. His eyes, though, shimmered like oil on water, empty, but hiding something immense beneath the surface. You're ready, he said. Ready for what? He didn't answer, just led me through a hallway I'd never seen. Though I'd walked this building 100 times, the walls seemed to bend subtly the further we went, as if the architecture itself was trying to correct for a truth too heavy to hold. He stopped at a false wall behind the green room, placed his palm against it. A door revealed itself with a hiss of warm air. He turned to me and said softly, "You've given enough to earn a glimpse." Then he stepped aside. I went alone. The stairwell wound down in a tight spiral, each step slick with condensation. The light bulbs overhead twitched violently, buzzing with panic, not decay. At the bottom, a black door, unmarked, unlocked. As I stepped through, the air grew thick and metallic, sweet, almost like burnt sugar rotting on a stove. And then I saw it, the shrine. But that word, shrine, felt blasphemously inadequate. The room was cavernous, impossible in size. Velvet curtains hung like flayed skin, their fibers heavy with old blood. The smell was a sick symphony. Wax, mold, sweat, decay. Pain made manifest. Display cases lined the walls, each housing something that once belonged to someone who no longer could. A rusted tiara spattered with blood. A ballet slipper split and soaked. A child's teddy bear with eyes replaced by camera lenses. Clapperboards bearing dates I recognized from headlines, not call sheets. Jars sat on pedestals. Teeth, nails, torn bits of script. One held an eyeball still tethered to an optic nerve, coiled like an old film roll. There were sketches scattered like offerings, storyboards of torment, diagrams of devices that blurred the line between surgery and performance art, scribbled notes on pain thresholds, ink-streaked questions scrawled into every margin. Is fear stronger than grief? How many takes before the soul fractures? Do screams read better in mono or stereo? And at the center, a towering idol, obscura, 10 feet tall, hunched as if crushed beneath centuries of confession. Its body was an amalgam of bone, copper, and celluloid. Film strips coiled like intestines through its ribs. Its face was a swirling mass of silent screams. Mouths frozen mid-howl, eyes made of cracked lenses. Its arms spread open in welcome or warning. In one hand, a scalpel, in the other, a paintbrush. Around its waist, a belt of audio cables and human hair. At its feet, an altar. Fresh blood glistened there, ashes piled like unedited reels. A plaque read, Obscura, patron of the final cut, saint of the endless take, god of shock, he who hungers for the gasp before the cut, he who feeds on the blurring of fiction and flesh. Behind me, the door groaned shut. The lock clicked like a throat closing, and then the voices came. Not through the air, through me. This is where the raw becomes sacred. This is where the audience ends. This is where the story bleeds. My knees buckled, because I understood finally what the studio was. Not a place for making movies, but a place for offering them. And we, the dreamers, the artists, the desperate, we were the lambs.